Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere most historians like to keep wrapped in velvet and denial, inside the royal bedroom. Specifically, we're following the girls, yes, girls, who are pushed, primped, and promised into those silken chambers for the sake of power, peace, and prestige. You'll meet them in their finest gowns, but don't be fooled by the jewels. They're here on somebody else's agenda. And fair warning, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm not here to trap you in a Versailles mirror maze unless you want to be. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Always curious who's up late with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 14, maybe 15 if your family really stretched the timeline. You've just arrived at a glittering court. Could be Tudor England, Bourbon France, Ottoman Istanbul, take your pick. What matters is that you are small, polite, and entirely at the mercy of the moment. Your family has raised you like a sacred doll for this very purpose. The carriage ride took hours, your gown itches under the arms, and the jewels weighing down your hair feel more like a bribe than an honour. Because they are. Everything smells like roses and secrets. A man you've never met, a powerful man, probably the king or someone he keeps close, wants to see you. Or rather, your father arranged for you to be seen. Technically, you're not promised to him yet. This is more of a presentation, like you're a cake brought out at the end of a feast, or maybe a lamb. You walk in, every step choreographed by your mother's endless drilling. Don't look directly at him. Keep your hands demure. Smile, but don't grin. Your voice should be soft. Your movements, softer. You're a vision, and you will behave like a prophecy come true. Your entire family's survival depends on how this night plays out. And yes, he's older. Much older. His teeth are yellow from wine. He smells like musk, leather, and sweat dried onto power. He doesn't rise when you enter, just gestures lazily, as if summoning a servant. Which, in a way, he is. This is your job now. You're not here to seduce. That's the biggest myth. You're here to convince. You're here to demonstrate that your family can be trusted to raise the future queen, or consort, or duchess. Your waist is tight-laced, your manners even tighter. You can't show fear, and you definitely can't say no. No one's explained the details of what will happen tonight. Not clearly. They just said things like be brave and serve your dynasty. You'll learn later in whispers that your predecessor, another girl like you, cried too loudly one night, and was dismissed. No one's sure where she ended up. The bedchamber is beautiful. Canopy of crimson velvet, candlelight flickering on oil paintings of past conquests, tapestries with Greek gods pretending this whole thing is divine. You sit on the edge of the bed, heart rattling inside your ribs like a bird caught in a cabinet. Then he tells you to stand. It's not a request. And when you do, he begins to inspect you like you're a tapestry too. Comments on your skin, your hair, the way you carry your shoulders. You'll do, he might mutter, or worse, say nothing at all. Tonight he won't even touch you. Not yet. He's waiting for the paperwork. A proper alliance, a treaty signed in ink and womb, but you've passed the first test. He liked what he saw, or didn't mind what he didn't. You're sent back to your rooms, your ladies-in-waiting cooing about how honoured you must feel, how proud your mother will be. One of them slips you a honey cake, like you're a child who sat through church without fidgeting. You lie awake all night. Here's your first historical fact. Royal courts used the bedroom as a diplomatic chamber just as often as the throne room. Alliances were forged in sheets, treaties ratified with kisses and crying girls. Now here's your quirky footnote for the night. In some courts, like 18th century France, the bedding ceremony was public. Like public. Nobles and courtiers would literally escort the newlyweds to bed, watch them get in, and then leave the room to let nature take its course. Everyone had a front row seat to the performance of duty, and the scholarly debate. Oh, it's this. How much agency did these royal girls actually have? Some historians argue that noble women were active political players, leveraging charm, intelligence, and timing to gain influence. Others point out that, at 14, you're still years away from your brain fully developing, and probably too terrified to strategize much beyond don't get sent home in disgrace. You're not Cleopatra. You're a chess piece who hasn't learned the board, but you survive the first night. Maybe you even smile in the morning. That's the terrifying thing. You begin to adapt. Tomorrow you'll be taught how to eat without showing your teeth, how to walk like you glide, how to make a man feel like he's the one in control, even when your life is hanging on the edge of his interest. Your mother sends a letter that says, "You've made us proud." You read it while staring at your untouched breakfast. The eggs are cold, your hands are colder. They've raised you for this, but no one taught you how to want it. You wake up in silk sheets that aren't yours. The bedchamber, vast and silent, doesn't smell like home. It smells like polished wood, candle wax, and something sweeter. Clove water, maybe, used by the maids who cleaned while you slept. You're not used to anyone cleaning up after you while you're unconscious. At home, servants didn't touch your things unless told. Here, your body, your time, your private space, none of it belongs to you anymore. It's like your soul's been quietly confiscated at the palace gates. You're being summoned. The message is soft, almost musical. His Majesty requests your presence. It might as well be a bell tolling for your old life. You're not a girl anymore. You're a message in human form, wrapped in lace and combed hair. Because today, it's not about you as a person. It's about you as a political solution. The corridor you walk through gleams with wealth. Gold-framed portraits of long-dead kings line the walls, all painted with those same smug expressions. Men who took what they wanted and got statues for it. Your slippers make the faintest sound on the cold marble. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You've learned this quickly, like an animal recognizing the boundaries of a new cage. Today's meeting isn't with the king directly. It's with his advisors, his mother, maybe a cousin or two. They want to see what the girl from the south looks like in the daylight. What's her posture like? Can she dance, speak their language? Does she bat her eyelashes too much or just enough? You're being measured with every glance. And not just for your fertility, though. Make no mistake, that's top of the list. You're also being weighed for political worth. Your father is a duke with shipping access? Excellent. Your cousin is married to the Polish heir? Even better. You speak 3 languages. Very impressive. Too impressive. There's a thin line between desirable and dangerous. They ask you gentle questions. Do you enjoy embroidery? What do you read? Have you met many suitors before? But each one is a test. Answer wrong, and they'll say you're proud. Too clever, not pliable. The best wives, after all, are the ones who smile with their eyes and say nothing with their mouths. You answer in soft, measured tones. You say you love embroidery. You read romantic poetry. You've never spoken to a suitor before today. And isn't it an honour to be here? They nod. You've passed. For now. Here's the thing. Royal daughters were human treaties. For centuries, across Europe, Asia, Africa, anywhere with a court and a crown, girls were sent across borders as living promises. We won't invade your territory if you take our daughter. We'll support your claim to the throne if you marry our niece. It was diplomacy by dowry. Every wedding dress was stitched with strings attached. Take Eleanor of Aquitaine. She was one of the wealthiest women in medieval Europe, and her hand in marriage transferred massive political power. First, she married the King of France. Then, when that didn't pan out, she gave him 2 daughters but no sons, whoops. She divorced him and married the future King of England. Boom! 2 empires reshuffled because of one woman. But here's the uncomfortable footnote. Eleanor wasn't acting totally freely either. Her power came with risk. She spent 16 years imprisoned by her second husband for encouraging her sons to rebel. Not exactly couple goals. And it wasn't just the girls of Europe. In Ming Dynasty China, imperial daughters were often married off to Mongol leaders or regional princes to maintain peace. Same logic, different culture. You're the ribbon on a diplomatic present. Try not to get crumpled. The scholarly debate here? Whether these women were victims or negotiators. Some historians say royal daughters had more agency than we assume. After all, they learned multiple languages, knew the politics of at least 2 courts, and often wrote letters that directly influenced policy. Others say that agency is a stretch when your marriage was sealed before your first period. But back in your world, none of that matters right now. You've been approved. There's a new dress waiting in your chamber that evening. Blue silk with gold thread at the sleeves. It's more grown-up than your usual dresses. The neckline dips slightly lower. Not scandalous, just suggestive. You don't choose what to wear. The king's tailors do. The dress is a statement. She's ready. Tonight there's a banquet. You sit 2 seats away from him at the table, across from a bishop who keeps staring at your necklace like it might bite. There's music, laughter, peacocks roasted and glazed in wine, gilded pastries shaped like swans. You're offered wine, which you sip carefully. One gulp too many, and you'll be the girl who got drunk at court. One too few, and you're a boring child. It's exhausting, this game of exactness. Then he speaks to you, just a short question, about your home, your favourite flower. Nothing monumental, but he's watching your reaction, testing your nerves. You say lilies. He nods. He doesn't smile, but that's fine. He doesn't need to. He's the king, or close enough to one. The table shifts slightly after that. People glance at you differently. The bishop grunts approval into his swan. You've been marked. By the end of the night, one thing is clear. The decision is close. Either the marriage contract is already being drafted, or someone is figuring out if your dowry can be negotiated. Your ladies-in-waiting begin to whisper in corners. Someone brings you a small box filled with rose oil and combs carved with the king's family crest. No one says it aloud, but it's a silent yes. You don't sleep. Again. Instead, you lie awake in your borrowed room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this is what success feels like. Your sisters back home will envy you. Your mother will boast. Your father will be granted land. Your name will go down in court history etched beside your husband's in tapestries and treaties. But your body, your girlhood, was the payment. And no one asked the girl if she wanted to be the treaty. The wedding comes quicker than you expect. Or maybe it's been a slow, crawling march and you just lost all sense of time. Either way, the day is here. Bells ring, priests chant, people throw petals and smile too hard. Your face hurts from holding the expression of serenity. You don't feel serene. You feel like a pawn dressed in pearls. But you smile because anything else would be noted and gossiped about before you even step down the aisle. The ceremony itself is elaborate and long. Layers of tradition, most of which you barely understand, pile on like your gown's embroidered train. You're handed a gold ring. You're kissed on the forehead by some official with sour breath and long icy fingers. At one point you're required to kneel beside your new husband while he makes vows on both your behalf and his. Your voice barely features. Some part of you drifts away during the ritual. The crowd cheers when it ends. Bells toll again. You're led away, hand in hand with your new husband. A man who's either old enough to be your father or someone you've exchanged a total of 7 sentences with. Or both. Your hand feels very small in his. You're still waiting for someone to say, "You don't have to do this." But no one ever does. Because now you're a wife. And the first duty of a royal wife is to perform the second ceremony, the consummation. This one doesn't involve priests, but it does involve witnesses. If you're lucky, those witnesses stay outside the door. In France, in England, in various Catholic and Protestant corners of Europe, it was common to have a few high-ranking courtiers watch the bride and groom be put to bed, literally. The sheets would be examined the next day. Virginity had to be proven. Honour was staked on blood. In some places, a midwife or noblewoman would be there to check the bed linens herself, like a bizarre bridal auditor. Tonight, you're in a room that smells of jasmine and heat. The fire is too warm, your dress is too heavy, your heart is beating so hard it makes your ears buzz. You're supposed to act like this is an honour. But it feels more like an execution. He's polite at least, you think. Or maybe he's just practiced. You try not to flinch. You try not to breathe too loudly. You try to think of anything else. His touch is not cruel, but it isn't tender either. It's work. You're now part of the royal machinery, one gear meshing with another. You wonder if it will always feel like this. Afterward you lie very still. He falls asleep quickly. You stay awake, eyes open, watching the moonlight slide across the floor like spilled milk. A servant comes in quietly to check the sheets. She doesn't meet your eyes. You think about asking her what she sees, how much blood is enough, but you stay silent. Here's your historical fact. The consummation of a royal marriage was often a legal requirement. Without it, the union could be annulled. Queens were sometimes discarded on the grounds that they hadn't bled on the wedding night, regardless of truth. Anne of Cleves famously escaped a miserable marriage to Henry VIII because he found her unattractive and claimed he couldn't perform. No blood, no proof, no queen. Now here's your twisted little historical quirk. In some Spanish courts, they would hang the wedding sheets from the balcony the next morning to show the proof of the bride's virginity. Literal public laundry. Imagine walking out to breakfast and seeing your own blood fluttering in the wind like a royal flag. And the scholarly debate? Oh, it's the concept of virginity itself. Some argue that the entire obsession was about controlling women's bodies for inheritance, proving a child belonged to the right father. Others say it was also symbolic. A nation needs a pure bride just like it needs a clean slate. Either way, it wasn't about the girl. It was never about the girl. But let's talk about you, because that's what we're really here for. The morning after, you're officially the king's wife, or his favourite, or his consort. Depends on the region and the religion. Maybe there's still a queen somewhere else, locked in another wing of the palace, watching from behind silk curtains as you rise in favour. You walk through the halls and feel them watching you differently now. The ladies smile more, the men lower their eyes, the servants bow just a little deeper. It's as if some invisible lock has clicked open and you're part of the inner sanctum now. But that key is your body, and what it just endured. You have breakfast served to you in bed. The sheets are gone. You don't ask where they went. There's a letter from your mother waiting on a tray beside the morning fruit. She congratulates you, says your father is honoured. The Duke's household had a feast in your name last night. People toasted you with wine and song. You read the letter twice, then fold it carefully. You wonder if she knows what the second ceremony was really like. You wonder if she remembers hers. You'll never ask, and she'll never tell you. Over the next few days, the court buzzes with talk about your smile, your new jewellery, how quickly the king has taken to you. No one says consummated out loud, but it's in every look, every hushed conversation you pass. You're not just a girl anymore, you're a wife, a bedmate, a future mother. The political equation has shifted, and with it comes danger. Because now your womb is a battlefield. If you don't get pregnant soon, whispers will start. Maybe she's barren, maybe she's cursed, maybe she lied about being a virgin. Yes, even if they saw the blood, especially if they saw the blood, there's always a way to twist the story. And you, dear girl, are not the one writing it. You think back to your first day at court, walking into that grand hallway still clinging to some sense of agency. Already, that feels like a lifetime ago. Now, your days are managed. Your nights are expected. Your body, your performance, your silence, these are your currency. You spend them daily. And the worst part, everyone around you treats it like success. They start counting almost immediately. Days since the wedding, days since the consummation, days since your body was officially declared open for business. You barely have time to catch your breath before people begin calculating when you might announce good news, as if a royal pregnancy is something that happens on cue, like a court musician summoned from behind a curtain. Your ladies-in-waiting whisper in corners. A midwife begins stopping by under the excuse of checking on your adjustment. You're suddenly fed different foods, gentler on the stomach. Someone brings you saffron milk. Another presses herbs into your hands with a wink. Your body has become a national interest. Not yours anymore, not really. You're the vessel now. The future of a dynasty is supposed to take root in you, quietly, discreetly, and preferably soon. You're told to rest. You're told not to ride, not to dance too wildly, not to laugh too hard. Apparently joy might shake something loose, but they also tell you to smile, to be visible, to keep the court spirits high. You're a walking contradiction, sacred, watched, invisible, and on parade. In your private chambers, it's a strange kind of waiting. Your husband visits you some nights, not others. It's rarely romantic. Mechanical, always. A duty performed between meetings and war councils. You say nothing. There's no space for reluctance. Your body stiffens before he even touches you, but you smile because you must. Because power has a scent, and he's saturated in it. You start to track your own cycle with an intensity that borders on obsession. Every cramp, every shift in your appetite, every subtle change in your breasts becomes a clue, a hope. Then the blood comes again, quietly, discreetly, wrapped in cloth and hidden away. And with it comes disappointment. Not yours, exactly, but theirs. The kingdom sighs through its teeth, and you're left with the pressure to do better next time. Here's the historical fact. Bearing children, specifically sons, was the single most important task for most royal wives. In many courts, a queen's worth was directly tied to her fertility. Catherine of Aragon gave birth to 6 children. 5 died. Eventually, her failure to produce a surviving male heir led Henry VIII to cast her aside for someone he thought could do better. Spoiler, she couldn't either. Now for your quirky twist. In certain royal courts, if a woman gave birth to a son, the entire city celebrated. Cannons fired, bells rang, wine flowed from public fountains, literally. If it was a daughter, quiet congratulations, maybe. Sometimes not even that. You could grow a human inside your body for 9 months, risk death bringing it into the world, and still disappoint everyone because the baby didn't have the right kind of genitals. And the debate? Scholars still argue over whether royal women had any control over their reproductive destinies. Sure, some queens brought in their own midwives, tried traditional herbs, and followed the stars. Others were subjected to horrifying regimens, leeches, bleeding, forced fasting, or worse. But the larger question remains, was any of it ever really in their hands? Or were they just blame magnets for biology? You're not sure what you believe yet. You just know that the longer you go without swelling at the waist, the more pressure you feel from the glances in the hallway, the subtle withdrawal of court favour. Even your clothes begin to betray you. The seamstresses hover with quiet expectation. We'll let out the waist just a little, they say hopefully, but they don't have to. Your body isn't changing. In the garden you pass other women, mistresses, courtiers, widows, each with their own smile, their own history of survival. One of them, a striking woman with eyes like flint, brushes your arm as she walks by and murmurs, "Don't let them count you out too soon." You don't know what she means, not yet. And then there's the Queen Dowager, his mother. She watches you from across the Great Hall like a hawk in pearls. You suspect she's already ordered someone to track your monthly linens. She knows how this works. She did it before you, and if you fail, she'll help find your replacement. You hear stories, half whispers, about other girls who didn't conceive. One was sent back to her father's estate with her dowry halved. Another was quietly moved to a smaller wing of the palace where no one visits her. They say she wanders the halls at night, barefoot, murmuring nursery rhymes to no one. Some nights, you dream of babies. Not beautiful cherubs, but strange, ghostly creatures with hollow eyes. They reach for you with long fingers, mouths open, but no sound comes out. You wake up sweating, alone, the sheets twisted like ropes, and yet during the day you must shine. You're required to attend public outings, religious ceremonies, festivals, staged performances. You sit in your ornate carriage like a doll on display. The people wave, children throw flower petals, women shout blessings. You're a symbol of future stability, the living promise of heirs to come. They don't know that your stomach is flat beneath the corset, that your womb is empty, that each month's silence is a scream no one hears. The palace midwife begins preparing you for enhanced fertility. You're given new tonics, bitter, gritty, and awful. One smells like old cloves soaked in vinegar. This will help, they say. You ask what's in it. They don't tell you, just smile and nod. Another visit from your husband, another awkward night. You think of a cold stream, of birds in trees, of anything that might lift you out of your own body while it happens. He kisses your forehead when he leaves, like a reward, like a thank you for doing your part in the machine. After he's gone, you stare out the window and imagine a different life, one where you're just a girl in a meadow, barefoot, reading poems to yourself, laughing too loudly. No one watching, no one waiting, no one measuring your worth by a stained bedsheet or the curve of your belly. You shake it off. There's no room for fantasies here, only cycles, only waiting, only the unbearable weight of expectation pressing silently on your womb. They send you a portrait, not of you, but of another girl, younger than you were when you arrived, maybe 13. She's painted in stiff brocade, her eyes flat with the kind of politeness that masks terror. You recognize it immediately. The artist has softened her cheeks, made her hands impossibly delicate. The note attached is brief, a potential match for the Duke of Moravia. But you know what it really means. She's being prepped, shaped, measured for her usefulness just like you were, and something in your chest caves a little. You remember being the girl in the portrait, how you practiced smiling in the mirror until your cheeks hurt, how you were told that beauty was your weapon and it must be sharpened, polished, and unsheathed at the right moment. You didn't understand back then just how much of you would be carved away in the process, because in this world, beauty is power, but but only the kind that comes with strings attached. Your appearance isn't yours, it belongs to the realm. Your face must flatter your husband's image, soothe the anxieties of the court, and reassure the people that the future will be attractive and orderly. A pretty wife means a secure kingdom. A fertile one? Even better. So you sit for a new portrait of your own. It's been ordered by the council, not because anyone misses your face, but because they want to send it to other courts, to remind them of what kind of queen this country has. You're instructed to wear the blue silk gown that makes your eyes look brighter. Your hair is arranged in ringlets, pinned with pearls. You must appear calm, luminous, and slightly mysterious. But not too mysterious. That's for mistresses. Queens are serene. You sit still for hours while the painter frowns and mutters and scratches at his canvas. You don't talk. You've learned that silence is more powerful than cleverness, more valued than wit. When the painter pauses to ask if you're tired, you shake your head with a smile. But your spine is aching, and your hands are cramping in your lap. It's exhausting being beautiful the right way. Here's your historical fact. Beauty wasn't just appreciated at royal courts, it was weaponized. In many dynasties, especially in early modern Europe and the Ottoman Empire, girls were chosen for proximity to power based largely on their looks. Fair skin, symmetrical features, long hair, these were seen not only as attractive but as proof of moral virtue. A beautiful woman was assumed to be good, noble, and pure. Ugly, obviously a witch. That's just science. Now the fringe fact. In the 16th century France, noble women sometimes slept with slices of raw veal on their faces overnight to keep their skin pale and soft. Others used lead-based creams that slowly poisoned them, all in pursuit of the fragile, ethereal glow that men romanticized in poems but wouldn't dare wear themselves. And the scholarly debate. There's ongoing discussion about how much agency beauty actually gave royal women. Some historians argue that women used their appearance to influence politics behind the scenes, by seducing, manipulating, or charming their way into decisions. Others argue that beauty was just another leash, one more way to control them. You could only use your looks until they faded. Then what? Back in your chambers, you peel off the pearl pins and massage your scalp. You're alone for once. No maids, no midwives, no sidelong glances. Just you. And even that feels like a borrowed version. You examine your own reflection. Your face is familiar, but distant. You wonder what version of yourself has been immortalized on that canvas. Would you recognize her if you passed her in a corridor? Would she recognize you? Later, a package arrives from a foreign court. Inside, tucked carefully into velvet, is a jeweled mirror. It's a diplomatic gift, from a prince rumoured to be searching for a bride. Your stomach knots. You're married, of course. But royal marriage is never a guarantee of permanence, not if politics decide otherwise. The mirror is beautiful, too beautiful. You hand it off to a lady's maid and pretend not to care. The next morning you overhear courtiers gossiping about your portrait. "She looks so composed," one whispers. "As if she's already seen everything," says another. You wonder if that's a compliment or a warning. Later that day a letter arrives from your mother. It's full of praise. She's heard about the portrait, the prince, the mirror. She's pleased. She mentions how lucky you are to be so admired. "Your beauty has always been your greatest gift," she writes. You stare at the sentence until the ink blurs. She means it kindly. She always has. But it hits like a slap. Because when your beauty becomes your identity, it becomes your cage. You must preserve it, protect it, and pretend it doesn't control you, even though it does. Every wrinkle is a countdown. Every scar a political liability. There's no space to age, to change, to be human. You must stay frozen at the peak of your appeal, a statue carved from femininity and expectation. You start to notice how others move around you, how servants avoid eye contact if you're not smiling, how advisors compliment you before they speak of anything serious. They need to acknowledge the packaging before the substance. It's protocol. One evening you pass the girl from the portrait, the new one. She's arrived early for language training, which is code for becoming court appropriate. She curtsies low and beams at you, her cheeks flushed with hope. You smile back, but something in your chest tightens. You want to warn her. You want to say, don't let them take your face away from you. Don't let them turn it into a mask. But you just nod and glide past her. Queens don't break rank. You return to your room and lock the door behind you. For a few precious minutes you let your face relax completely. No smile, no composure, just bone and breath and weariness. And in that moment you realise the royal bedroom might be where you lose your innocence. But it's the royal mirror where you lose yourself. It starts innocently enough, or at least it looks innocent. A new tutor is assigned to your daily schedule. An older woman with a soft voice and sharp eyes who says she's here to round out your education. You've already been taught to read and write, of course. You can quote Virgil, recite Latin blessings, and embroider your family's coat of arms without pricking your finger. But this is something else entirely. She arrives each morning after breakfast, brings her own chair and settles in with a smile too smooth to be entirely warm. Today, she says, her voice almost playful, we'll be discussing what makes a royal consort truly memorable. She doesn't mean generosity or piety. You figure that out by day 2. This is training, but not the kind that ends in certificates or scrolls. This is performance, seduction, the delicate, dangerous art of influence. At first it's coded in elegance, how to tilt your head while listening, how to let a man's gaze land on your collarbone without appearing aware of it. Then the conversations get bolder. She talks about desire the way a priest might describe sin, methodical, cautious, but unavoidable. You're told which perfumes awaken which moods, how to wear your hair to suggest submission or command, when to speak, when to moan, when to cry, how to fake all 3. By the end of the week you understand. You're being taught how to please a king, not out of love, not even out of obligation, out of strategy. Because in these halls your body is more than a vessel, it's leverage. Here's the historical fact for tonight. Royal girls, especially queens and favoured mistresses, were often taught how to be physically and emotionally pleasing to their powerful husbands. The curriculum varied from court to court, but the concept was universal. A queen's charm could prevent wars, secure alliances, and keep her husband's attention from wandering, if she played her cards right. Quirky footnote? In Versailles, during the reign of Louis XV, the king's mistresses were sometimes recruited from a place called Parc aux Cerfs, a literal house where young women were educated, primed and polished for royal pleasure. They were given lessons in etiquette, music and, of course, bedroom conduct. The goal wasn't just sex, it was influence, coated in powdered wigs and satin. And the academic debate? Some historians argue that this grooming gave women a form of soft power. Emotional intelligence turned political currency. Others argue it was another form of trafficking dressed up as court tradition. The line between preparation and manipulation gets thinner the closer you look. Back in your present, the tutor finishes another lesson by handing you a book. It's wrapped in silk, discreetly titled, and absolutely scandalous. Not that you'd admit it aloud. It's written like poetry, but the meaning between the lines is as clear as firelight. You're supposed to read it slowly. Learn something. Practice. The message is as old as monarchy. You may not choose your life, but you'd better figure out how to survive it. You start to understand that in this place no one is entirely safe, especially not the wives. The mistresses, at least they have an expiration date. They're beloved until they're not. Then they disappear, married off to a distant cousin, retired to a countryside estate, or quietly poisoned in their sleep. But wives, you're tethered to him for life. You're expected to inspire desire and obedience, to produce heirs and stay desirable. It's a lifelong audition with no script and no final curtain. The worst part? There's competition. The other girls, ladies-in-waiting, visiting nobility, diplomatic daughters, they start appearing with more frequency. Always lovely, always younger, each with their own perfume, their own little accidental moments with your husband. One laughs too loud at his joke, another brushes his sleeve with her hand and apologizes too sweetly. You see the glint in their eyes. You know that look. You wore it once. Now you're the one being watched for signs of fading. Your body, once a promise, is now an expectation. You're no longer the mystery. You're the standard, and the standard is exhausting. One night you're invited to a private supper, just the two of you. Candles, wine, soft music in the background. He smiles, calls you dear, compliments your new hairstyle. It should be romantic. But it feels like an assessment. You try to be clever, affectionate, attentive, but not too eager. You flirt with grace. You sip your wine like someone who's seen things. And afterward, when he takes you to bed, you do what your tutor has taught you. You perform, not because you want to, because it's expected. Because this is how queens are made, not on the battlefield, not in the council chambers, but here, in silk sheets, in the careful choreography of sighs and obedience. The next morning, a necklace appears on your pillow. Emeralds. You smile when the maid hands it to you, but you don't touch it for hours. You know what it means. It's a reward. Not for love, not even for loyalty, for success, for playing your part in the machinery. You're climbing still. But now you see the steps are made of bones. Later that week you pass one of the other girls, this one's 17, maybe 18. She blushes when she sees you. You almost feel sorry for her. You want to tell her, this isn't what you think. You don't win here. You just endure longer than the others, but you don't say anything. Because you're not the girl anymore. You're the queen, or close enough to one, and queens don't warn the next girl. Queens smile, hold their posture, and continue the lesson. You're sitting in your chambers when the midwife arrives unannounced. No knock, just a respectful nod from a guard as she slips through your doors with a basket and a strange smile. You recognize the look immediately. It's not politeness. It's anticipation. You already know what she's here for, even before she opens her mouth. She's here to see if you're still a virgin. Not because she doubts your wedding night happened. Everyone knows it did. The whole court practically toasted to it. No, this is a ritual check. A confirmation for the record. An old tradition that someone up the ladder has decided to resurrect. Probably because a visiting envoy has arrived and your marriage needs to appear. What's the word? Ah, yes. Validated. You don't want to ask how she's supposed to confirm something that already happened. You don't want to hear about tissue elasticity or healing rates or any of the unsettling anatomy lectures your mother avoided giving you. But you sit still. You let it happen. You stare at the canopy above your bed while she prods gently and hums like she's checking for ripeness in a piece of fruit. When it's over, she declares you appropriately intact, which is either nonsense or a lie, but everyone nods and moves on. Here's your historical fact for the night. Virginity testing was an actual practice across multiple royal courts, particularly in medieval and early modern Europe, as well as parts of the Ottoman Empire and beyond. It was seen as a necessary proof of purity, despite being biologically flawed and deeply invasive. If a bride failed the test, the consequences could be devastating. Annulments, exile, even accusations of witchcraft. Your quirky historical tidbit. Some medieval marriage contracts included an actual clause about the bride's virginity. If she turned out to be damaged goods, the marriage could be considered void, and her family might have to return the dowry, which basically meant your uterus came with a warranty. The scholarly debate here? Oh, it's a lively one. Can we even define virginity in a historical sense when the medical understanding was based on total fiction? The idea of the hymen as a seal that breaks and bleeds is a myth that modern medicine has long debunked. But for centuries, that myth held immense power. Over women, over families, over entire alliances. Scholars argue about how much was believed versus how much was just enforced theatre. Back in your room, the midwife leaves, and you sit on the edge of the bed feeling not just exposed, but hollowed out. You're not a woman to them. You're a ritual object, a symbol to be handled, examined, confirmed, and passed from hand to hand like a sacred relic. Except relics are treated with more reverence. Later that day, you're summoned to a feast honouring a visiting delegation. Foreign dignitaries in fur-lined cloaks, jewelled turbans and embroidered robes line the long banquet table. You're seated high and visible, the king beside you, your smile a steady, exhausted curve. You're wearing the emerald necklace again. It catches the candlelight and throws it back in little sparks, like a signal flare you wish someone could read. The conversation flows with honeyed words and diplomatic charm. The men talk of trade, border disputes, marriages between nations, and always, subtly, they glance at you. You're part of the discussion whether you speak or not. One man jokes that your kingdom is blessed with such pure, radiant queens. The room laughs politely. You feel the laughter slide across your skin like oil. Later that night, after you've survived another series of polite toasts and veiled evaluations, your husband doesn't come to your chamber. No warning, no excuse. He's probably with his advisors, or maybe with one of the girls who doesn't yet know how empty it all feels. You lie awake, as usual, listening to the wind press against the windows. Somewhere outside, a dog howls once and falls silent. You think about what just happened, about the test, the way your body was treated like a lie waiting to be disproven, the absurdity of it all, and how no one would ever question whether a man had arrived in his marriage untainted. There's a fury brewing deep in your belly, not the kind that explodes, The kind that coils, that waits, that burns slow and patient. The next morning you request books, not the pretty poetry volumes left in your sitting room for show. Real books, histories, treatises, maps. You say it's for cultural enrichment, for your future children. Everyone smiles and agrees and orders the court librarian to deliver a selection. You can almost hear their thoughts. Let her pretend to be intelligent. It's charming. And then you start reading during the quiet hours of the afternoon, when no one needs you to smile or curtsy. You learn the names of rivers you've never seen, the lineages of kings you've never met, the shifting borders of empires drawn and redrawn over centuries by men who couldn't name the women who gave them heirs. You read until the letters blur and your hands go numb. You also start to write letters, careful ones. Letters that appear bland but carry quiet questions. To your mother, to your sister, to the woman who once brushed your arm in the garden and told you not to let them count you out too soon. You ask things without asking them. You say things without saying them. You become fluent in subtext, because knowledge is dangerous. But pretending you don't have it, that's how you survive. One evening your husband finds you reading and laughs. He sits beside you and picks up the book, amused. "What is this, a scholar queen?" he teases. You laugh, demur, and say, "Only trying to keep up with your brilliance." He grins. He kisses your cheek. He doesn't open the book, but you remember his tone. No. It's the tone of someone who's not used to being outread, and that, you realise, is something new, something powerful, something yours. You close the book after he leaves, slide it back into its velvet sleeve, not because you're finished, but because you've just begun. Let them test you. Let them prod and measure and inspect. You know now that the most dangerous thing a girl can carry into the royal bedroom isn't innocence. It's a mind that's wide awake. It happens in the 6th month. No swelling, no morning nausea, no dreams of silver cradles or tiny fingers curled around yours. Just blood. A lot of it. More than usual. It stains the linen so dark the maids go silent when they change the bed. They don't speak to each other. They barely look at you. But their hands move faster than normal, as if the speed might make it less real. You know what they're thinking. You're thinking it too. Whatever might have been, if anything ever was, has been flushed away. No one says the word miscarriage. Not directly. That would be admitting too much. Instead, you hear soft murmurs of exhaustion, imbalance, the strain of court. You're told to rest, to drink broth, to avoid strenuous movement, harsh light, bad news, certain perfumes. You're given a silk sachet stuffed with dried lavender and rosemary, as if flowers can stitch closed a womb that wouldn't hold. Your husband doesn't visit. Not for 3 days. When he finally does, he pats your hand like a soldier offering condolences to a widow. "Next time," he says gently, as if your body were a field that simply failed to grow the right crop this season. You nod, smile, swallow the grief like wine gone sour. But here's the unspoken truth. This wasn't the first time this has happened to a girl like you, and it won't be the last. In fact, here's your historical fact for the night. Early miscarriages were heartbreakingly common in royal households, though rarely acknowledged. Queens were expected to bear sons, but no one ever talked about what it meant to lose them, especially before they had faces, names, or ceremonial blessings. Miscarriages were brushed aside as delicate episodes, or feminine disturbances, unfit for court conversation. And the dark little quirk? Some queens faked pregnancies entirely. Desperate to hold on to power or avoid being cast aside, they'd pad their bellies, stay out of sight, and claim to have given birth to stillborns or fragile infants sent away for private care. Some were even rumoured to swap in peasant children as royal stand-ins. None of it ever worked for long. The scholarly debate? It's growing louder. Was the royal obsession with fertility actually a form of psychological warfare against women? Modern historians argue that the constant pressure, the lack of medical understanding, and the political stakes created a system where failure wasn't just disappointing, it was dangerous. And yet these women were supposed to smile through it, to absorb the blame, to try again. That night you lie awake staring at the ceiling's painted fresco. It's a pastoral scene. Angels, lambs, innocence, lies. You're supposed to feel hope. You feel hollow. You're told to attend chapel the next morning, to thank God for your health, even though you're fairly certain the only part of you that's healthy anymore is your ability to pretend. The chapel is freezing. Cold seeps up through the marble into your bones. The priest says something about faith being tested, about God's timing, about submission. You say nothing. You kneel. You pray without forming any actual words. Your ladies say you look radiant in the candlelight. You want to scream. Instead, you return to your rooms and ask for the physician. Not the usual one. The other one. The older man with quiet eyes who once treated your tutor for a fever. When he arrives, you dismiss the maids. You say you want to speak privately. That alone is enough to spark rumours, but you don't care anymore. You ask him what really happened. You ask him what you can do. You ask him plainly if there's something wrong with you. He hesitates, and then he tells you, carefully, that the stress, the lack of nourishment, the tightly corseted gowns, the constant expectations, they all weigh on the body, that sometimes the womb just gives up, that it's not weakness, it's not sin, it's just exhaustion. You nod, thank him, say nothing more, but the seed of suspicion has been planted, not about your body, about theirs. What if this whole system, the endless testing, the inspections, the prayers and superstitions, wasn't designed to protect you at all? What if it was built to make you feel like the failure, so no one had to admit that the problem was never you? You start watching the other women more closely. Not the girls. They're still too young, too eager. The older ones. The ones who've survived. The widows, the dowagers, the consorts who faded from favour but never vanished. They walk like ghosts, but when they look at you, their eyes are sharp, knowing. You wonder how many of them bled like this. How many of them cried into pillows, wrapped their arms around empty bellies and kept walking, and you realise they're not ghosts at all, that they're survivors. And if you're smart, you'll learn how to become one too. So you start small. You change your diet. Not because the court physician tells you to, but because you decide to. You slip books into your sleeves during library visits. You ask your tutors offhand questions about how laws are passed, how taxes are decided, who controls the coin minting. You smile at your husband, laugh when expected, kiss him with practiced warmth. But your mind is elsewhere, always elsewhere. You begin to keep a private journal. In it, you write the names of every woman you meet, every servant who whispers secrets, every midwife who hesitates before speaking. You chart your own cycle, your mood, your health. You start to know your body better than anyone else ever has. Because if this court wants to reduce you to your womb, you will make your womb a weapon. You're not just a girl anymore. You're not even a queen. You're a system of survival in human form. Let them try again. Let them test. Let them demand. You will give them nothing but silence, and someday, when they least expect it, you will give them a reckoning. You've stopped trying to remember all their names. The girls, that is. They come and go too quickly now. Whispers of new arrivals flutter through the court like petals from a dying bouquet. A baron's niece from the coast. A merchant's daughter with striking eyes. A foreign noble with delicate manners and enough perfume to mask her homesickness. All of them young. All of them lovely. All of them made up of teeth-gritted hope and the rustling of freshly unpacked silks. You watch them the way a wolf watches deer. Not hungrily. Never that. Just with a cold understanding of how the game is played. At first you were careful not to look too long. Not to let your face betray anything. Not pity. Not disdain. Now you don't care. You meet their eyes. You nod slightly. A gesture of recognition between veterans and rookies, though they don't know that's what they are. Some smile back, nervous and thrilled. Others drop their eyes, afraid of offending you. One curtsies so deeply she nearly topples. You almost want to tell her. You don't need to bow to someone whose throne is made of eggshells. The king calls fewer and fewer knights. His interest wanes in waves, returning briefly if your dress catches the light just right, or if some political matter pushes you back into visibility. But the truth is, he's chasing novelty, newness, someone who hasn't bled yet, who hasn't lost a child, who hasn't learned to hold a mirror up to his failings. That's not you anymore. But you're still here. And that, in this world, is a quiet triumph. Here's your historical fact for tonight. Royal courts were often saturated with women vying for attention and favour, especially where kings kept multiple mistresses or had unofficial harems. In France, under Louis XV, his private estate, Parc aux Cerfs, became infamous for housing a steady rotation of teenage girls selected for beauty and obedience. They weren't just playthings. They were politically useful. Their families benefited. Sometimes, so did they, briefly. Quirky historical footnote? In some Ottoman courts, women were ranked by beauty and status like a courtly caste system. The highest-ranking concubines could earn titles, land, even political power, but if they fell out of favour, they could be married off, or, worse, quietly disappeared. The term favourites was never as sweet as it sounded. Now the scholarly debate: was the presence of so many women a sign of the king's power, or a sign of his political instability? Some historians argue that excessive focus on the royal bedroom was a distraction from weak governance. Others say it was strategic, alliances forged through intimacy, a private chessboard where women were both pawns and queens. You begin noticing changes in the hierarchy. Girls who once walked behind you now walk beside you. Or worse, just a half step ahead. You're not being outright displaced, not yet, but the air is shifting. You're treated with politeness rather than reverence. The cooks no longer send your favourite cakes unasked. The master of ceremonies forgets to announce your entrance. Twice. So you adapt. Again. You start taking walks through the less travelled halls, the ones where real decisions happen. You linger near the council room, where voices rise and fall behind closed doors. You pretend to be lost. You learn to read lips. You begin to collect information like a spider gathers vibrations through her web. Not all of it is useful, but some of it is gold. The king's finances are strained, the treasury low, a new tax is being considered, one that will anger the merchants. A border skirmish is quietly flaring into something worse. The Queen Mother is at odds with the Chancellor. These are not your battles, officially. But knowledge is currency, and you're no longer rich in beauty, favour or heirs. You need another kind of wealth. You pass this knowledge along sparingly. A quiet word to a general's wife. A comment at dinner that lets the king know you might have access to something he doesn't. It works. He looks at you with interest again. Not desire, not affection, but curiosity. That's enough. Then, one morning, a girl disappears. Not one of the polished noble daughters. A servant girl, 16 maybe. She had soft eyes and a habit of humming while brushing your hair. Gone. No warning, no explanation. The headmaid claims she was dismissed for inappropriate conduct, but her voice trembles when she says it. You make a discreet inquiry. No one answers. One guard whispers that the girl was caught in the wrong hallway at the wrong time. Another says she spoke too freely about a certain nobleman. You don't get the full story. No one ever does. But you understand the lesson. You stop speaking at night. You stop singing in the bath. You stop trusting the mirror with your full face. Because survival here is not just about childbirth or beauty. It's about silence. About knowing when to vanish inside yourself. But even as you fold inward, you watch everything. The subtle favour granted to one girl because her uncle supports the war. The way another is gifted pearls after crying in just the right tone. The coded messages passed in embroidery patterns. The letter you see one lady drop and another pick up without a word. It's a secret language. And now you speak it fluently. You're not the king's favourite. You're not the girl on the throne. But you're still standing. Still watching. Still learning. And in this palace of fragile empires and crumbling seductions, that might just be the most powerful position of all. Because queens can fall, mistresses fade, but shadows? Shadows last. She arrives in a litter lined with gold brocade and escorted by a procession that moves as though it's gliding. A foreign girl from across the mountains, too young, too pale, too perfect. Her gowns are stitched in a style that hasn't reached your tailors yet. Her voice is high and sing-song, trained to sound like birdsong even when she's lying. She bows when she meets you, lower than expected, with wide, blinking eyes. The whole court watches. You smile. Because you've played this scene before. You were this scene before. They call her a guest, but everyone knows the game. She's not here to see the countryside or learn about your customs. She's here to be admired, considered, and possibly bedded. If not officially, then unofficially, which is the way things are done now. The king's interest in her is obvious from the first supper. He watches her with the same distracted fascination he once used on you, like she's a puzzle he hasn't decided whether to solve or smash. You take your seat beside him with your usual grace, your smile a carefully sharpened blade. She's seated 3 places down, close enough to be seen, far enough to maintain the illusion of respect. Her eyes flick to you occasionally. You know that look too. Is she a threat? A friend? Is it better to be liked by the Queen, or quietly outmaneuver her? She'll learn soon enough. Here's your historical fact tonight. Many royal courts operated with the full knowledge and participation of mistresses, especially when kings were too powerful or too politically trapped to divorce or dismiss their wives. In France, the maîtresse en titre was practically a formal title, with her own apartment, staff and court influence. Sometimes she wielded more power than the actual queen, and the quirky twist. In certain courts, queens and mistresses shared cordial, even strategic relationships. They had to. A smart queen knew that befriending the king's favourite could secure her position, gain her access, or at least prevent outright humiliation. In some cases, the mistress would advise the queen, pass messages, or intercede on her behalf. Now the debate. Were these women playing separate games, or the same one with different masks? Historians argue whether the mistress had more power because of intimacy, or whether the queen's symbolic role always outweighed it in the end. What's more valuable, influence over a man's body, or a kingdom's perception? Back in your palace, the girl is settling in. She walks carefully, like someone who's afraid of creaking floorboards. The other ladies titter when she passes, but their smiles never reach their eyes. No one likes a new favourite, especially one with ambition behind her blush. Rumours start immediately. She's here to replace you. She's carrying royal gifts. She's been seen with the king's chamberlain. Her father has promised soldiers if she's married off here. None of it is confirmed. All of it is true. You cross paths with her in the garden one afternoon. Alone, except for a distant maid pretending to prune roses. You pause. She curtsies. You study her face. She's prettier up close, delicate, but not fragile. Her lips tremble slightly, but she doesn't speak first. Clever. You decide to throw her a line. You've come a long way, she nods. I've never seen so much marble. You smile at that. A simple answer, artfully delivered. She's learning. She'll last longer than some. You let her walk beside you, not because you trust her, but because it benefits you to be seen together. The court won't know whether you're allies or rivals, and that confusion is worth more than any outward display of status. Over the next few weeks her presence swells. She's included in banquets, invited to dances, gifted fine fabrics from the Queen's own stores. The lie is printed on the card in clean ink. She wears the silk, of course. She smiles and thanks you. You smile back. Always smiling, always calculating. You notice, however, that she doesn't smile as much when she thinks no one's watching. You catch her once, alone in the chapel, holding her hands so tightly together her knuckles turn white. Another time, in the hall after supper, her eyes glisten just a little too brightly. She's cracking, slowly, quietly. The weight is pressing in. You know how heavy it gets. So you do something unexpected. You send her a gift, a carved comb with inlaid mother of pearl. No note, no message, just an unspoken offer. You don't have to drown. She sends a bracelet in return. Simple, but thoughtful. She understands the rules now. This, too, is power. And maybe it's not war this time. Maybe you don't need to destroy her to win. Maybe letting her survive is the smarter play. Because here's the thing. No one tells the new girls. Kings are temporary. But alliances echo. The king grows bolder. He asks her to sit beside him one evening, just once. Everyone notices. You keep your expression serene, even as the whispers snake around the hall like ivy on stone. She looks uncomfortable. She's not ready for this level of scrutiny. You make a note of it. Later she comes to your chambers, says she's lost her way. A bad lie, but a decent excuse. You offer her wine, she declines. Her hands tremble as she smooths her dress. She says nothing about the king. Neither do you. That's the unspoken pact. Protect each other by protecting nothing. Instead, you talk about music, the way certain notes seem to hang longer in the winter air. She laughs once, softly. A real sound, not rehearsed. You realise she's not pretending to be someone she isn't. She doesn't know who that is yet. Do you remember that feeling? When she leaves, she thanks you, sincerely, then adds, "I think I was wrong about you." You smile. Everyone is at first. As the door closes behind her, you feel something new. A strange flicker of control, not over her, not over him, but over the story. You're writing this one. You're shaping how it unfolds, not as the star, not even as the villain, but as the editor. And in a palace where girls come and go like seasons, that's the most powerful role of all. There's poison in the perfume. Not metaphorically, not this time. The vial arrives on a silver tray with no note. It's nestled among your usual offerings. Rose oil, powdered rice, and a small jar of lip stain made from crushed berries. But the scent of this new perfume is off. It smells like jasmine with something sharp underneath, something metallic and bitter that lingers at the back of your throat even after the first hesitant sniff. You don't touch it. You don't scream either. You simply nod to the maid and make a mental note of which tray it came from, who delivered it, and where they were standing when they did. Then you excuse yourself from the room and begin the quiet unravelling of a potential murder plot with the same calm you apply to choosing earrings. Because by now, you understand something essential. If you're valuable, someone will eventually try to erase you. Here's your historical fact. Poison was a weapon of choice in royal courts, especially among women who lacked armies or titles. In Renaissance Italy, poison was called the inheritance powder, a tool of social mobility as well as vengeance. In the French court of 𝓑𝓸𝓻𝓲𝓷𝓰, poisons were so common that nobles were advised not to drink from any cup they hadn't watched being poured. Your weird little historical quirk? Some women carried poison in their rings, literally. Hollowed out compartments that could hold a few grains of powdered death, just enough to stir into wine or soup. There are documented cases of such rings being used for both assassination and suicide, depending on who lost the game first. Now for the scholarly debate. Were these poisonings political acts or personal vendettas? Some historians argue that many accused poisoners were scapegoats, especially women, especially foreign ones. Others believe poisoning was a calculated form of power among the powerless, a tool for correcting the scales when everything else was stacked against them. Back in your present, you summon the head steward. You don't accuse, you inquire, politely. Do we know who arranged today's deliveries? Your tone is curious, not alarmed. That's important. Alarm signals weakness. Curiosity, that's dangerous in its own right. He stiffens, makes a note, promises to investigate. Within hours, the perfume is gone, the tray replaced, the maid reassigned to laundry duty in the outer palace, a quiet shuffle of servants. Nothing is said aloud. But you hear the message behind the silence. Someone wants you out of the way. The obvious guess would be the girl, the foreign one, still shimmering with youth and uncertainty, but you don't think it was her. She's too new, too watched, too unsure of which enemies are worth making. No, this has the signature of someone deeper in the game, someone older, someone losing ground. And there's only one woman who fits that description. You haven't spoken to her in months. The Queen Dowager, his mother. She's always been an ice sculpture wrapped in silk, beautiful, unmoved, untouchable. She ruled before you arrived. She still pulls strings from the velvet shadows of her apartments, where everything smells like incense and dried citrus. Her son is her legacy, her weapon, her most successful experiment. And you? You are the contaminant. You decide to pay her a visit. It's not a request. You dress with care. Dark crimson, hair in a braided crown, no jewels, nothing flashy. You want to look serious, composed, slightly dangerous. Your arrival is announced with no ceremony. She doesn't stand when you enter. She never does. The conversation begins with pleasantries, the weather, the state of the garden, her health. She sips tea while you pretend not to scan the room for additional scents. Finally, you lean in just slightly and say, "There was a perfume on my tray this morning." She doesn't blink. "An unfortunate accident, I'm sure," you add, still smiling. There's a pause long enough to write a new dynasty in. Then she says, "Things go missing sometimes. Other things appear. Life is delicate, my dear." You nod, as delicate as a heartbeat. The silence between you is thick with velvet and venom, and that's it. That's the warning delivered, the battle line drawn. When you leave her chambers, your hands are steady. Later, you learn another noblewoman has fallen ill. Not dead, just ill. Her name doesn't matter. You've only spoken twice. What matters is that she drank from the same wine bottle your table was supposed to receive. It had been rerouted, a staffing mistake. Everyone whispers about food safety for 3 days. Then things return to normal. You don't. You begin changing routines, randomizing your meals, dismissing your maids before bathing, testing all fragrances on fabric instead of skin. You stop drinking wine at court. No one notices. Or if they do, they say nothing. It's all part of the performance, part of the quiet paranoia that wraps the palace like ivy. Slow-growing, inescapable, pretty from a distance. But you're not just defending yourself anymore. You begin learning how to make tinctures, not poisons, not yet. Just tonics, balms, things you can name and hide in plain sight. A soothing syrup for coughs, a bitter root for digestion, a tea that makes the drinker sleep a little longer than usual. The herbalist on the edge of the palace grounds is old and nearly blind, but she teaches you gladly, calls you my little ghost. You don't ask why, you just listen, because knowledge is still the one thing they can't strip from you. And now you're collecting it in careful doses, every betrayal, every silence, every strange gift, logged in your mind like pages in a grim fairy tale. You're not a damsel, you're not a villain, you're the architect of your own trapdoor. Let them think you're cornered. Let them forget that the most dangerous woman at court isn't the loud one, the young one, or even the beloved one. It's the one who's already survived the first attempt on her life, and is still smiling. They listen through the walls. You discover it by accident, waking early one morning before the maids arrive, the room still wrapped in half-light, when you hear a sound behind the panelling, a slight creak, a cough swallowed too late, not the settling of old wood, not a mouse, a person, standing too close, holding their breath. You don't move, you lie still, your own breathing suddenly a performance. A small shift in your position, slow and casual, then silence. You wait. You count. Whoever it is, they think you've gone back to sleep. You rise an hour later and start your day with all the usual graces, your hair brushed and bound, your voice pleasant, your smile rehearsed. You say nothing about what you heard. That's the trick, isn't it? You don't let them know you know. You gather the knowledge and carry it like a knife between your ribs, out of sight, always ready, because now you understand. Your own walls are not your own. Here's the historical fact for tonight. Many royal courts employed professional listeners, servants, guards, even handmaids, trained to report private conversations back to spy masters or monarchs. In Versailles, some rooms were designed with hidden peepholes and acoustic panels. In Elizabethan England, letters were routinely intercepted and decoded. The palace was not a home, it was a mouth with too many ears. And the fringe fact. In Russia's imperial courts, Empress Catherine the Great reportedly had mirrors placed at strategic angles to observe servants and visitors alike. Nothing that looked like surveillance, everything that was. The throne, it turns out, sat atop a stage rigged with trapdoors and whispering galleries. The scholarly debate: did royal women learn to manipulate the spy system, or were they always its victims? Some researchers argue that queens used the knowledge of watchers to seed false stories, stage emotional performances, and steer political rumours. Others insist the surveillance was overwhelming, designed to strip women of even the illusion of privacy. Either way, the result was the same. You learn to wear a mask at all times, so you begin testing the walls. You speak casually of headaches in one corner of your chamber. The next day, the royal physician appears with a tincture you didn't request. You mention loneliness near the bed frame. That night, the king's scribe sends an invitation to join a hunting picnic. You sigh about boredom in the bath. By morning, your shelves are mysteriously stocked with fresh music books and embroidery kits. It's a game. They think they're learning you. Really, you're learning them. One evening, you stage a small performance. You leave a letter on your writing desk, unsigned, half-finished, filled with carefully chosen phrases. He's grown distant. I don't know who I can trust. I would do anything to secure my place. Then you leave the room for an hour. By dinner, 3 people who never speak to you have suddenly become warm, friendly, attentive. The girl with the delicate accent offers you a seat closer to the king. A nobleman comments on your intelligence. Even the Queen Dowager sends a chilled pear tart. Your favourite, or at least what they think is. You smile at each of them. You eat the tart. You've won this round. But now the question shifts. Who exactly is doing the listening? You study your ladies-in-waiting. All sweet faces and nervous laughter. One has a habit of lingering by the doorframe too long. Another keeps adjusting her necklace, even when she's not being watched. You start planting phrases into your conversations, small, sharp hooks. A name you're worried about. A sudden dream you had that feels prophetic. Each time you watch who flinches, who glances at the floor, who leaves the room too quickly. You're not paranoid anymore, you're precise. And while they listen, you gather more. The political tension outside the palace is growing. Whispers of protest in the cities. A harvest that's been poor for 2 years running. Soldiers delayed in their pay. Merchants angry about tariffs. You're not supposed to know any of this, but you do. Because the butler speaks more freely than he should when he thinks you're out of earshot. Because a footman has a brother in the town guard. Because even the walls beyond your own have cracks. And if they can use them, so can you. You begin crafting your own web. Not of lies, yet, but of soft truths. Gentle manipulations. You mention the unrest to a visiting duchess casually over tea. She passes the worry on to her husband, a general. You suggest in the presence of a bishop that the court should show greater generosity. By the week's end, the king is ordering a public bread donation. He doesn't know it was your idea. That's the point. You're becoming useful again. Not through your beauty, not through your body, through your reach. And yet, the price of usefulness is visibility, and visibility attracts enemies. One night, while walking the halls alone, you pass a servant you don't recognize. Tall, silent, no bow, just a small, tight-lipped smile as he carries a covered tray toward the lower wing. You turn, follow at a distance. He vanishes behind a panel you hadn't noticed before. Another night, a guard asks if you'd like an escort, at a moment when you hadn't planned to go anywhere. Just in case, he says. He's too polite, too prepared. You begin sleeping with the light from the hearth still glowing. You keep a letter opener beneath your pillow, not a weapon, but something solid, cold, reassuring. You do not fear them, but you respect what they're capable of, because you've learned something no tutor ever taught. Information is safer than beauty. Silence is louder than screams, and survival means staying 3 thoughts ahead of whoever's listening. You look in the mirror one morning and realize something's changed. You don't recognize your face exactly, not because it's older, but because it's stronger, sharper. There's a look in your eyes now that says, I know what you're doing and I might let you do it anyway, just to see what happens. You smile at your reflection, knowing full well someone might be watching from behind the walls, and if they are, let them take notes. You're just getting started. You find yourself surrounded by silk and stone. Even your breath has begun to sound rehearsed, as if the palace has absorbed your rhythm and plays it back to you at half volume. Nothing happens quickly here. Even betrayal glides like oil over marble, and by now you've grown so fluent in the unspoken rules that it takes only the twitch of a brow or the pause after a compliment to know who's threatening you. But it's etiquette that's killing you the slowest. Every blink, every breath, every slip of your sleeve has meaning now. When you enter a room, you must curtsy to exactly the right angle. You must wait to speak until spoken to, but not too long, or you appear slow-witted. When you laugh, it must be soft and timed. When you cry, it must be in private. No rage, no realness, just the perfect balance of charm and compliance. You're a statue with a beating heart, and no one wants to hear it thump. Here's your historical fact. Etiquette wasn't just formality at royal courts, it was law in disguise. Manuals were written, revised, and enforced with the same intensity as military orders. In 18th century France, failing to bow to the right person at the right time could cost you your position, or worse, your family's reputation. In the Qing dynasty, palace women were taught over years how to walk, kneel, speak, and breathe according to imperial codes. These weren't preferences, they were systems of control, your quirky fringe fact. In certain Renaissance courts, it was considered rude to turn your back on the king, even accidentally. Servants had to walk backward out of the room to avoid offence, which led to more than one disastrous tripping incident involving candles, tapestries, and at least one gout-ridden ambassador. The scholarly debate: was etiquette a shield for women in court, or a cage? Some historians argue that mastering manners gave royal women a form of invisible power. They could manipulate a situation through subtle cues. Others argue that etiquette was a muzzle, designed to keep women in a state of constant performance, unable to speak or act freely without risking exile. You know where you stand on that argument. You've been muzzled since the day you stepped into this palace, and yet, somehow, you've turned it into a language. You've begun wielding etiquette like a sword hidden in a fan. At dinner, you spill a few drops of wine near your plate. The maid freezes, the court holds its breath, but you smile, laugh gently, and raise your goblet with grace, offering a toast to imperfection. The king chuckles, the rest of the table exhales. The message is clear. She makes mistakes, but still controls the room. You use your fan like a signal flag, a tap on the wrist. I'm listening. A half fold. This is boring. A full snap shut. I am done. Only a few notice, the ones worth watching. The others think you're merely adjusting to the heat. You walk one step slower through the great hall than is necessary. It forces others to match your pace, to acknowledge your presence. It's a dance, and you are no longer the girl taught to follow. You've learned that power doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it simply leans back in its chair and waits for everyone else to correct themselves. And yet, the cost is high. There are days you want to scream in the chapel, tear your gown at the seams, stomp through the corridors barefoot and wild just to remember what it feels like to be unmanaged. To move without thinking about posture. To speak without the filter of strategy. To be human instead of ornamental. But you don't. You never do. Because everything is political now. Even size. You learn that too late one evening when you walk past a visiting noble and his wife, and allow your expression to drop, just for a heartbeat. Not anger, not grief, just tiredness, a flicker, a moment. And the next day it comes back to you in whispers. She's unhappy. She's losing favour. She may be unstable. You realise then, even your silence has weight. You begin training yourself not to show anything at all. You practice it like a new language, the still face, the neutral breath, the nod that means everything and nothing, a smile with no heat, a gaze that drifts without committing. You master it so well that sometimes even you can't remember how you're actually feeling underneath. And yet, etiquette has its loopholes. You find that certain behaviours are expected to be eccentric, harmless, so you adopt them. You ask for fresh lavender in your chambers each morning, not because you need it, but because it makes you seem delicate, soft, unthreatening. You begin humming foreign lullabies under your breath when walking alone in the garden. A maid says it's sweetly strange. You let her say it. You start composing short notes in calligraphy, never signed, never addressed, just a line or two of poetry left in public places, on a bench, on a windowsill, behind a vase. The court begins to speak of them. Who writes them? Are they secret love letters? Is it the Queen? They don't know, and the not knowing gives you space. You don't need permission to be mysterious. You only need the right kind of silence. Eventually, the etiquette becomes muscle memory. You no longer need to think about how you sit, how you gesture, how you sip your tea. But you do think about who's watching you do it, and how you can use that gaze to your advantage. You see, when everything is performance, the audience gives you power, and you're learning to steal their attention without them realizing it. Your beauty might have faded from their tongues. Your influence may no longer be sung in dining halls, but when you stand, they still turn. Not because they love you, because they fear missing something important. You have become the embodiment of grace with teeth, a lullaby sung with the promise of thunder. Let them think they've taught you how to behave. They haven't. They've taught you how to command from behind a smile, and if the price is never being able to collapse, never showing pain, never being real, so be it. That's the tax for living in a world that only values you when you disappear behind perfect posture.
Somewhere in the back wing of the palace, behind the arched gallery where no courtiers tread unless summoned, and past the prayer rooms that no longer echo with sincere devotion, there's a door with no title, just a small iron handle, cool and unassuming. Most people don't even notice it, but you do. You find it by accident, or fate, or maybe because the palace, like a living creature, occasionally opens its ribcage to someone who listens hard enough. Beyond that door is a narrow staircase, spiraling down into air that smells of limestone and candle wax. You descend without hesitation, not out of bravery, but because you've long passed the point where fear is useful. Fear, in this place, is as ornamental as your jewelry. At the bottom, a room, bare, dusty, a single wooden desk, stacks of parchment, and a man. He's older than the king by 2 decades, bent-backed and sharp-eyed. He doesn't rise when you enter, doesn't ask your name. He simply glances up and says, "Late, aren't you?" You don't answer. Just step forward and place your palms on the desk, as if to anchor yourself. There's a pause. Then he reaches for a drawer, slides it open, and pulls out a scroll tied with faded red ribbon. He says, "This is where the real stories are kept." And suddenly, you understand. You've found the palace's unofficial archive. Here's your historical fact. Beneath the dazzling facades of royal life, secret records were often kept. Unofficial chronicles written by clerks, scribes, or even discarded mistresses. In some medieval courts, there were shadow libraries of unsanctioned truth, ledgers of scandals, secret births, betrayals swept beneath velvet rugs. These weren't the stories told in stained glass. These were the ones that still bled when you touched them. And the fringe detail? In the Habsburg courts, there are rumors of a private book maintained by the Dowager Queens, passed from one to the next, filled not with prayers or family recipes, but with warnings, which noblemen lie, which doctors deceive, which servants report back to whom. Its existence has never been confirmed, but its influence, whispered in every marble corridor. And the scholarly debate? Did these secret records actually shape policy? Or were they just women's whispered revenge? Some argue they had real political impact, used to blackmail or protect. Others dismiss them as emotional scribblings, but dismissing a woman's diary is always the first mistake, isn't it? Back in the archive, the old man pushes the scroll toward you. You open it. The handwriting is inconsistent, years of different hands layering over each other. It's not chronological, it's confessional. A patchwork of events hidden under gold leaf and gowns. A queen who faked a stillbirth and smuggled her living child to a convent. A mistress who seduced the bishop and used him to poison a rival's inheritance. A royal bride who never arrived, her ship lost, but her dowry suspiciously intact. It's not history, it's truth, sharpened and tucked away where only ghosts can find it. And now, you're part of it. You begin visiting often, not daily, too obvious, but enough to learn, enough to contribute. You bring ink in your sleeve, add small notations, leave warnings in clean, cautious script. You don't sign them, but the old man nods each time, as if you've added a new brick to the hidden wall of power that runs under the palace like a second spine. One night, when thunder claws at the windows and the court is busy drinking away its boredom, you descend into the archive and read the most recent entry. Lady A was found weeping in the gallery. Her hair was unpinned, her lips bruised, said it was her own clumsiness. No one believed her. Nothing was done. You trace the ink with your finger, feeling it burn. You know Lady A. She laughed too loudly at dinner last week. She tried to correct a nobleman's pronunciation and was met with silence so sharp it could have drawn blood. And now she's written into this book, not as a victim, not yet, but as a warning. You begin writing her name in your own code, repeating it in the margins, marking her existence so it cannot be erased. Because that's the real danger here, not the abuse, not the lies, not even the poisoning. It's erasure. The palace doesn't destroy women, it forgets them, smooths over their names, stitches over their grief, writes them out of every version of the tale, told over gold-gilt goblets and too rich wine. And so, you fight it, quietly. You become a recorder. You write what you see. You tuck notes between books in the royal library. You scratch messages under the lids of powder boxes in guest rooms. Sometimes you just write a name, sometimes a date, sometimes a phrase like, "She did not fall." You teach one of your maids the code, an older girl, steady hands, no illusions. You don't tell her everything, but enough, just enough to pass it on if something happens to you. Because survival is no longer enough, not for you. You've already survived, now you want memory. And one night, while walking alone in the garden, you come across her, the foreign girl, still lingering in the palace like a beautiful, unanswered question. She's sitting on a bench, her shoulders tight. You sit beside her without a word. After a pause, she says, "Do you think they'll remember me?" And without turning, you answer, "If they try not to, I'll make sure they do." She looks at you then, really looks, and in her eyes you see what you once saw in the mirror, a desperate desire to matter, to leave something behind besides a perfume bottle and a fading portrait. You don't hug, you don't cry, but something passes between you in that moment. An inheritance not of land or title or marriage, but of witnessing. You both rise and walk back toward the palace, together, not queens, not rivals, but record keepers. Because history may be written by victors, but it is preserved by girls who refuse to disappear. The storm hits just after dusk, not rain, but rage. A tempest wrapped in silk and brocade, stomping down the east corridor in velvet slippers that somehow manage to sound like marching boots. The Queen Dowager has summoned you. No note, no explanation. Just a steward with gray eyes and a voice like ash who says, "Now." You don't ask why. You never do. Instead, you rise with slow precision, adjusting your gown without rushing, slipping your hands into a pair of pale gloves as if you're attending a recital, and not, possibly, your own execution. Her apartments are warm and overly scented, too many dried oranges and rosewater clinging to the air like mold disguised as sweetness. She's sitting beneath a portrait of herself, painted 20 years younger and 50 times kinder than reality. She doesn't stand. Of course not. "You've been busy," she says. Her voice is ice thawing on metal. You smile softly. "I have many duties, Your Grace." She lifts a letter, unfolds it. A piece of your writing, no signature, but the handwriting is unmistakable. This was found behind the curtain in the ambassador's study. Careless. The line written there is short, cryptic. It simply reads, "She remembers the girl who didn't fall." It's not a confession, but it's close enough. You say nothing. Silence is the only currency she respects. "You're clever," she says after a moment. "But cleverness makes a woman conspicuous, and conspicuous women end up punished. Or worse, forgotten." She says it so calmly, as though she's offering gardening advice. You bow your head, not in submission, but in deflection, like a tree bending in wind that won't break it. Here's your historical fact tonight. When royal wives or queens pushed too far, too visibly, they were often removed, exiled, imprisoned, or publicly humiliated. In Tudor England, Anne Boleyn was beheaded not just for alleged adultery, but for being too political, too confident, too defiant. In the Mughal Empire, Nur Jahan ruled behind the veil for years, but only because she masked her power behind her husband's name. And the fringe fact? In the 18th century, it was popular for court painters to subtly erase female rivals by painting them into backgrounds, literally turning them into decorative flourishes on canvas, fading them out of focus, making them scenery instead of story. The scholarly debate? Was female rage at court revolutionary or self-destructive? Some argue that women who broke the rules of courtly obedience, who showed fury, ambition, strategy, forced the world to reckon with their power. Others argue that visible rage only hastened their downfall, that staying silent and surviving was a louder rebellion in the long run. Back in the dowager's chamber, the tension ripens. "You think you've outgrown your purpose," she says, still not raising her voice. "You think because the king tires of you, you can become something else, a scholar, a shadow, a saint." She rises, slowly, walks toward you. "You are none of those things," she whispers, standing too close. "You are a girl who got lucky, who stayed too long, who's writing a story no one asked for." You meet her gaze, calm as ever, but something in your blood begins to hum. "No one asks for a queen either," you murmur, "but they always get one." For the first time in years, her face tightens, a crack in the statue. You're dismissed without ceremony, but the air behind you feels hotter as you leave, like a room where something once caged has finally begun to stir. Back in your chambers, you find a book missing, one of your coded journals, not the most recent, but still dangerous. You know what it means. They're closing in. They're trying to undo you not with swords or poison this time, but with erasure. Erasing your paper, your records, your proof. So you go louder, not with shouts, but with presence. You begin appearing at events you once skipped. You smile brighter, dance longer, host small readings for visiting nobility, where you read harmless-sounding poems with meanings buried under layers of metaphor. You offer gifts to ladies whose husbands whisper rebellion. You leave handkerchiefs embroidered with warning signs. The code spreads. The court hums with your presence, even as some try to pretend they don't see you. And then, the whispers shift. They start calling you the Queen of Paper. Not to your face, of course. Behind fans, behind curtains. But you hear it, and you let it grow. Because here's the secret. You're not trying to rule the court. You're trying to haunt it. You make yourself unforgettable. A name etched into banisters, muttered in corridors, written in books too dangerous to be shelved in plain view. Girls seek you out now, not for flattery, but for guidance. Widows nod to you in quiet gratitude. Even the foreign girl has begun wearing her hair like yours, speaking in calm, strategic tones. You are no longer a cautionary tale. You are a blueprint. And still, you're being hunted. You find your cloak slashed. A maid disappears after delivering tea. A letter is intercepted. Nothing incriminating. But the message is clear. We see you. So you adjust. You begin to speak in verse, write in layers, encode everything. One night, you meet the girl in the old chapel, the one with the cracked tiles and ivy-draped windows. You hand her a folded parchment. If I vanish, you say, hide this. Read it only if they try to erase me. She doesn't ask what's in it. She simply nods. She's grown, hardened, ready. So as you leave the chapel, the candlelight behind you flickers. You know the Queen Dowager is watching. She always is. But now you stare straight into the darkness and give it a small, amused smile. Because rage, real rage, the kind that builds in silence and strategy, isn't explosive. It's patient. And yours has been waiting for years. They tell you you're pregnant again. The words come softly, as if breaking bad news, even though this should be a triumph. A midwife places her hand gently on your wrist as she says it, and you think, briefly, darkly, that she's trying to check if your pulse will betray you. But your heart doesn't race. It sinks. Not because you don't want the child, but because you remember what happened last time. The blood, the silence, the way your worth was measured in ounces of failure. You're not allowed to feel fear, of course. Not here. So you smile, you nod. You say something sweet and expected, about blessings, about the future, about how you can't wait to give the king a son. Then you excuse yourself to your chambers, where you sit on the edge of your bed and stare at your own hands as if they've betrayed you. Here's your historical fact. Pregnancy for royal women was a full-time performance, as public as it was dangerous. There was no privacy, not really. In some courts, queens were required to give birth surrounded by witnesses, dozens of officials, courtiers, and even noblewomen who crowded into the birthing chamber to make sure no child was smuggled in. Yes, really. The French court insisted on it after an heir once miraculously emerged during a suspiciously unattended birth. And your quirky fringe fact? In Tudor England, royal mothers were confined in a special chamber a full month before the birth. No men, dim lighting, covered windows, no sharp objects, supposedly for peace. But some likened it to a gilded prison. It was superstition and tradition, woven into soft bedding and ceremonial rituals, a gentle suffocation in the name of security. Now the scholarly debate, did these royal pregnancies empower women or strip them of agency? Some argue the act of carrying an heir gave queens temporary political power, protection, reverence, even leverage. Others insist it only amplified the pressure and reduced them to incubators wrapped in gold, where the only thing that mattered was the child, not the mother. Back in your chambers, preparations begin immediately. You're moved to a different suite, larger, more ornate, farther from the corridors where politics still breathe fire. The curtains are thicker, the air heavier. A nurse is assigned to you, along with 2 new maids and a rotation of doctors who inspect you like you're a prized mare preparing for auction. You're not allowed to leave without escort. No riding, no running, no baths that are too warm, no books that might agitate. One physician even suggests less music. You ask lightly if he believes the lute causes miscarriage. He doesn't answer. You're expected to rest, smile, swell, and you do swell. Your body remembers how to grow something, even if your heart doesn't know how to hope for it anymore. You track every flutter of motion, every change in your pulse, like it's a countdown. You try to make peace with the fear, but it clings to your throat at night when you lie awake, one hand over your belly, wondering if this child will make it to breath. The king visits you more often now, not out of affection, but ritual. A kiss on the forehead, a few minutes of soft pleasantries, then he's gone. You see the calculation in his eyes. This pregnancy is currency, and he's already spending it in his mind. You are a vessel again. You always were. The Queen Dowager does not visit, but her handmaid does, once. She brings a swaddled gift, a small carved rattle shaped like a lion, the symbol of the royal house. It's meant to be a gesture of goodwill. It feels like a warning. One of your maids falls ill in your 3rd month. She's gone by morning. No one tells you where. You don't ask. That's the rule of this palace. Absence is always louder than presence. Your appetite shifts. You crave cold things, citrus, chilled milk, pears from the royal orchard. The cooks oblige without question. You start to wonder what might be hiding in each bite. A different kind of fear creeps in. Not that you'll lose the child, but that someone else will take it from you first. You tighten your circle, send away 2 maids for incompetence, request the return of the older one, the one with steady hands and a quiet mouth. She comes without comment, and you feel the tiniest release in your chest. You're not safe, but you're not alone. Letters arrive from your family, joyous, giddy, full of prayers and embroidered baby bonnets. Your mother tells you that this child will be your redemption, as if redemption should weigh 7 pounds and scream. You respond with careful phrases, "We are well. The palace is peaceful. I am content." Each word pressed through your teeth like pearls too smooth to hold. Then the nightmares begin. You dream of giving birth in a room full of fire, of midwives who turn into wolves, of your child slipping through your arms and vanishing into fog. You wake each time breathless, one hand to your stomach, the other clenched so tightly you leave marks in your own skin. You ask the nurse for sleep tea. She brings it every night now, and you drink it slowly, watching the door even after it's locked. By your 5th month, the palace begins to change around you. Not visibly, no banners, no declarations, but in rhythm. Advisors pause when they pass your chamber. Servants nod lower. Your name starts appearing in reports again, mentioned alongside the word stability. You realize what you are. You are no longer just a woman. You are the future, a promise with ankles swollen from standing too long, and eyes too tired from watching every shadow. You speak less now. You write more. You write to the girl again, the one who's still learning to listen. You tell her small things, which herbs to avoid, which guards look the other way, where to find the hidden stair near the chapel. You end each letter with a phrase you never used before, "For when I'm gone." Because you've stopped assuming survival is a given. You understand now that this palace will take what it needs from you and bury the rest in silk and song. But not all of you. Not your words. Not your record. You write them down, line by line, pain and all. Because if you don't make it, if this child does, someone needs to know the price of his crown. Someone needs to remember that the cradle was carved from a coffin. She's 12, and already wearing a gown that weighs more than her body. 12, and walking like she's balancing an invisible crown, trying not to show the ache in her back or the fear in her throat. She arrives in a lacquered carriage, her face powdered too pale, her lips stained just slightly wrong. Her hair is woven into a braid thick with ribbons, and her eyes, too wide, scan the palace like a hunted animal pretending not to be. You know immediately why she's here. She's the next one. Not a guest, not a ward, not a diplomatic curiosity. She's here for the king, and she is a child. You watch her from across the banquet hall. She fumbles with her fork, watches the ladies around her before daring to raise her glass. She says "thank you" too softly and flinches when addressed directly. She's trying to disappear in plain sight, and you feel it like a hand around your own ribs. Later, you intercept her in the hallway. Not forcefully. You simply appear, soft-voiced, gliding out of the shadows like you belong to them. "Do you like music?" you ask. She nods, clearly unsure what answer is safest. "Then come," you say. "I'll show you the harpsichord room. The acoustics are kind." She follows you without question. Because even children know when a woman is offering safety in a place where safety is rare. Here's your historical fact. Child brides were tragically common in royal courts throughout history. In medieval and Renaissance Europe, marriages were often arranged by the age of 7, with consummation expected shortly after puberty, sometimes earlier, depending on politics and desperation. It was considered acceptable, even ideal, for a king to marry a young girl. She was malleable, fertile, unthreatening. The quirky, historical detail? In 14th century England, Isabella of Valois was married to King Richard II when she was only 6 years old. 6. The marriage was politically motivated, and while it wasn't consummated immediately, She was expected to act as queen in name, play-acting adulthood, crowned and cloistered, before she could spell her own title. And the debate, of course, is loud and ongoing. Was this simply a product of the times, or was it always a form of abuse disguised as alliance? Some scholars attempt to frame these arrangements through the lens of political necessity, arguing that maturity was measured differently in earlier centuries. Others, louder and with better arguments, call it what it is: exploitation, systematic, normalized, ceremonial. You offer the girl a cushion as she settles near the harpsichord. She touches the keys but doesn't play, just lets her fingers rest there. You sit beside her, not speaking at first. You can feel her waiting for the question, "What did you do to be chosen?" So you say it for her. It isn't about what you did. It's about what they think you might give them. She looks up, startled. You continue. Your silence, your obedience, your body, your children. She swallows. You add softly, "They'll call it love, they'll call it duty, they'll call it fate. But none of those words will protect you if you don't learn how to protect yourself." She blinks quickly, but doesn't cry. You admire that, not because strength is required, but because strength is rare in girls who've never been allowed to speak. You give her a piece of paper, folded into a small square. Inside is a diagram of the palace wing you used to walk when you were still considered new. It has secret doors, echoing corners, a stairway that skips the floor where the king sleeps. She tucks it away without unfolding it. Smart. You don't ask if she understands. You simply say, "If you want to leave a room, always face the door, even if you're walking backward." That night, the king watches her from his dais. You see the calculation in his eyes. He speaks of alliances with her country, mentions the strength of her family's navy. The wine is rich, and his voice is warmer than usual. He's already begun to imagine her as a solution to some unspoken problem. You excuse yourself before dessert. You sit in your room and listen to the thunder that isn't there. Just the pounding of your own memory, echoing louder than any storm. You remember being 15 and pretending it wasn't strange that a grown man held your hand like a claim. You remember the pain of your first night, the pressure, the panic, the silent scream under silk. You remember your mother's letter the next morning, telling you how proud she was. You fold it back into your memory. You don't have time to bleed nostalgia. Instead, you begin writing a note, not to the girl, to the Queen Dowager. You say only this: she is a child. Remember that before she remembers you. You send it unsigned. You make sure the ink is smudged, the paper soft from handling. Let them believe it's from a maid, a tutor, someone beneath notice. But you know she'll understand exactly where it came from, and you hope it makes her choke. A week passes, then suddenly the girl is gone. The official story is returning home to finish her education. A courtly gesture, a delay, no explanation offered. But you see the truth in the way her trunks are packed too quickly, her eyes darting too fast. The king doesn't say her name again. No one does. But before she leaves, you find a ribbon under your pillow. A small one, pale blue, the kind worn in a child's hair, and tied around it, in a knot so tight you almost miss it, is a single word stitched in white thread: ready. You let the ribbon fall through your fingers, then hide it in your desk drawer beneath your old letters. It isn't just a keepsake. It's a promise. Because the girls who survive this place don't owe it anything. And the girls who escape it, they'll come back stronger, if not for themselves, then for the rest of you still inside. The accusation doesn't arrive with fire. It comes with a whisper. One of your maids finds a folded paper slipped under your door at dawn. No seal, no name. Just 4 words scratched in slanted, hurried script. They're calling you witch. You read it twice. Then once more, slower. The word sits heavy in your hand, even heavier in your mind. Witch. Of all the things they could call you, it's almost laughable. You, who have only ever spoken when permitted, who walk as lightly as silk, who have learned to breathe in rhythm with the expectations of men. You, a witch. But then again, why not? You rid. You know things you shouldn't. You speak to girls in corners. You're never quite where you should be. and always exactly where someone least expects you. You refuse to break, refuse to rot, refuse to become a soft-footed ghost like so many others who once walked these halls and vanished behind locked doors and illness. It makes sense in the twisted math of the court. If a woman doesn't fade, she must have conjured something unnatural. Here's your historical fact. Accusing women of witchcraft was a time-honored tradition in every corner of royal society, especially when a woman rose too high or stayed too long. Across Europe, hundreds of noble women were interrogated, imprisoned, or executed for everything from infertility to sudden influence. A miscarriage? Witchcraft. A recovered illness? Witchcraft. A refusal to age quietly and gracefully? Burn her. And the unsettling quirk? In 17th century Scotland, a noblewoman named Lady Fowlis was accused of using wax figures to curse her stepsons. Her real crime? Threatening her family's inheritance. She was imprisoned for decades, never proven guilty, but never really innocent again either. Now for the debate. Was witchcraft ever about witchcraft, or just another word for female power? Scholars argue it was a tool, wielded against women who didn't fit the mold, too educated, too sexual, too politically savvy, too unbothered by fear. Witch became shorthand for woman who will not shut up. Or worse, woman who doesn't need a man to move pieces on the board. You sit in your chamber for hours, the letter still clutched in your hand, considering your next move. You don't panic. Panic is a confession. Instead, you begin quietly rearranging your protections. The girl who once taught you to boil bitter herbs now brings you different supplies. Ink that disappears with water, powder that stains lips subtly blue, roots that burn sweet when lit and turn any room into a wall of scent. Not spells, not curses, just tools, symbols, defense. You tell no one what you're doing, except her. The young girl. The one you helped slip out of the king's shadow. She visits once a week now, under the pretense of tutoring. She brings books. You exchange glances, code. You pass notes, invisible between the pages. She's growing bolder, her voice steadier. She's your contingency plan. If they take you down, she carries the truth. The rumor spreads by the end of the week. She speaks to the dead. She drinks wine laced with animal blood. She predicted the famine last year. She walks without making a sound. Have you noticed? My cousin swears she doesn't age. It would be flattering if it weren't so dangerous. You're not summoned directly. The court is too refined for that. But the signs are clear. A bishop lingers too long at dinner. A priest visits your maid under the guise of confession. Your letters are suddenly returned, unopened. One of your books goes missing from the library, then reappears with 3 pages torn out. They're building the narrative, slowly, carefully. So when they finally act, no one will be surprised. You know the play. You've seen it used on others. A baroness who had one too many miscarriages. A chambermaid who refused to convert. A foreign girl with strange prayers and perfect skin. Each one isolated, accused, forgotten, but not you. You are prepared. You dig out the scroll you copied in the hidden archives months ago. The one with the real stories, secret births, unsanctioned deaths, stolen inheritances tucked under the rugs of royal decorum. You underline 3 names. Men still alive. Men with secrets no one dares whisper. You fold the scroll, seal it, and send it to the bishop himself. No note. Just the implication, if I go down, you go with me. 2 days later, the rumors stop. Not disappear, just slow. Muffle. The court moves on to fresher prey. A merchant's daughter is seen with a noble's son. A duel is challenged over an insult no one heard. The wind shifts. You remain standing. But you know now how thin the ice has become. They don't need to prove you're a witch. They only need to believe it enough. And in a palace built on superstition and performance, belief is everything. So you make a choice. You lean into it. You stop hiding the herbs in your drawers. You stop explaining why the mirror in your chamber always reflects the window, even when the shutters are closed. You let them believe that the silver charm on your wrist is not just for show. Let them wonder. Let them worry. Because a woman they can name is a woman they can burn. But a woman they fear? She's another story. You begin to walk a little slower through the halls. Your eyes linger longer. You say things like, "We'll see how long the rain lasts," just before a storm breaks. You start lighting only 3 candles, never 2. When someone asks why, you smile and say, "Ask the old gods." And every girl in the room takes 1 step closer. Because what they call witchcraft, you call survival. And if that means whispering to ghosts, writing truths in invisible ink, and letting men fear what they can't own, then so be it. Let them try to burn you. You've already walked through fire. You learn what it means to be disposable the day the king stops asking about your health. Not because you've been cast aside officially, no proclamation, no stripped titles, no exile. No. The dismissal comes as silence. He no longer inquires after your condition at court dinners, no longer sends warm broth in the evenings or requests musicians to play in your chambers. The concern, however performative it once was, has vanished. The pregnancy has faded from his mind. The child is still alive, still growing. You still feel the gentle ripple beneath your skin each morning. But you can tell the king has already moved on. Perhaps because you're nearing the end now, and birth is messy, uncertain. Perhaps because he's found a fresher distraction. Or perhaps more truthfully, because your usefulness is reaching its natural expiration. And you have outlasted your season. It's the most dangerous time to be alive in a palace like this. Here's your historical fact. When a royal woman's protector died, or her king's affections faded, her survival rate dropped drastically. Many queens and concubines who outlived their usefulness were quietly retired, sent to convents, distant estates, or summer retreats that became permanent. In the Mughal Empire, women of the harem could lose their privileges overnight upon the emperor's death. In French courts, former mistresses were sometimes married off hastily, bundled into unions that made them disappear. And the historical quirk? In medieval Castile, widowed queens were often banished from court immediately, even while wearing mourning veils. They were seen as too politically dangerous to keep nearby. Too many secrets. Too many loyalties to someone no longer useful. Now for the scholarly debate. Did these women wield real power after their fall? Or were they only remembered as faded footnotes? Some historians point to queens who acted as regents, dowagers who pulled strings from country estates. Others argue that most were silenced by design, rewritten out of the story as soon as they no longer served the crown's future. You don't intend to be rewritten, so you prepare. The child is due soon. You feel it in the way your body protests, the way sleep becomes fractured, and your skin tightens across your belly like an overdrawn curtain. You feel it in the wary smiles from your maids, the increased presence of the court physician, the nurse who now lingers too long near the window. Everyone is waiting for the moment your power either solidifies or disappears with the afterbirth. They want a prince. Of course, they always want a prince, but you know the truth. Even a prince won't save you, not forever. You've already seen how boys become pawns, how heirs become targets, how even royal blood turns to bargaining chips in the wrong war. Still, you hope the baby is strong. You whisper to it at night, not lullabies, but facts, names, codes, the hidden door near the chapel, the name of the steward who can't be trusted, the taste of the honey used in the tea that masks poison, the kinds of things no lullaby teaches, the kinds of things that keep you alive. Then, one night, you're awakened not by labor, but by knocking. 3 hard knocks. No maid would dare, no physician would wait. You rise slowly, hand on your belly, and open the door just enough to see her. The Queen Dowager, dressed not for mourning or formality, but for war. Charcoal silk, no jewels, her hair braided tight like a crown that doesn't glitter, but crushes. She enters without waiting. Sits. You remain standing. "You've lasted longer than I expected," she says calmly. "That's either impressive or dangerous." You say nothing. She folds her hands in her lap. "There are whispers that your child will not be legitimate." You arch a brow. "The king is the father." She smirks. "He's no longer certain. That's the power of suggestion, isn't it? It's a lie. You know it. But lies told enough times in these walls start to shape reality. You've learned that better than anyone. She leans forward. You can either accept what comes next or vanish, quietly. There's a house in the south, gentle servants, sunlight, peace. Exile wrapped in lavender. You imagine it for a heartbeat. A life where your footsteps echo without fear, where no one watches you eat, where the walls don't whisper your name like a curse. But then you think of your child, and what happens if you're not there to guard their future? So you smile. I think I'll stay. The Queen Dowager's eyes narrow. Then she rises. You're no longer useful to him, but you're not harmless. That makes you unpredictable. And unpredictable women tend to have accidents. She leaves before you can answer. But the threat lingers like smoke. You call for your maid, the older one, the one with a scar on her wrist and secrets in her eyes. You speak low. She nods once, and by morning, 2 of your most loyal staff are gone, sent to distant towns, carrying copies of your letters, copies of the archive pages, names and dates and instructions. You aren't just protecting yourself now. You're building insurance. The contractions begin 3 nights later. Not sudden, not violent, just a quiet tightening that curls through your spine like a warning bell. You call the midwife. She lights the candles. The air thickens with heat and salt and steam. The room fills with quiet movement, clean towels, boiled water, whispered prayers. No witnesses are allowed. You made sure of it. You will not give birth to power in front of an audience. It takes hours. The kind of hours that collapse into each other, stretching and tightening like the very muscles tearing inside you. You've never known pain like this, not even that first night, not even the bleeding loss. This pain is deeper, realer, something ancient, older than the crown above your head. And when it ends, when the world goes still, there is crying. You weep, not from sorrow, not from joy, from defiance. The child is alive, a girl. They will say it's a disappointment. They will say you failed again. But you know what they don't. You know that a girl can survive what a prince cannot, because she's born from fire, because she was never expected to rule, and that is her greatest weapon. You hold her close and whisper her name, one that means strength in a language only a few remember. And when the nurse asks if you want to announce it publicly, you shake your head. Number, not yet. Let them wonder, let them wait. You are not leaving. You are not dying. You are not vanishing into lace and legend. You have given birth not just to a daughter, but to consequence. The court receives the news of your child's birth with an elegance so practiced it almost looks sincere. Trumpets at dawn, fresh garlands strung over the chapel archway, a line in the daily proclamation. Her Majesty delivered a healthy child, born under auspicious stars. Mother and daughter rest comfortably. And then a pause, a shift, a silence. Because they were expecting a son. You feel it in the way the congratulations arrive, muted, measured, apologetic beneath the surface. Not quite disappointment, no one dares say that, but a kind of delicate recalibration. As if your daughter is a fine silk when they had ordered steel. Lovely, but not quite useful. Polished, but not sharp. You stay in confinement longer than required. Not because you're unwell, but because you understand the game better now. Power shifts in absence. You let the court murmur without you. Let them guess. Let them fill the quiet with their own inventions. Meanwhile, you write. You name your daughter in ink first, before it's ever spoken aloud. You choose a name from your great-grandmother's line, the one the archivists forgot, but the women remembered. You write it over and over in different hands, tucking it into books, folding it into corners of curtains, carving it lightly into the underside of your writing desk. You are weaving her into the palace, the way they wove the king into tapestries and myths. Only you won't need a bard to sing her worth. You'll leave the proof in places they'll never think to look. Here's your historical fact. Royal daughters were often undervalued in their time, but remembered far more favorably by history. Women like Elizabeth I, Maria Theresa, and Catherine the Great were born into disappointment and rose into dominance. But in their early years, they were seen as soft links in dynastic chains, useful only when married off, never when left to grow untethered. And the strange footnote? In 15th century Burgundy, noble girls were sometimes raised in silence for the first few years of life. No public outings, no formal naming, no presence in court until their place in the family strategy became clear. Children were not precious, they were pending. And the ongoing debate was raising royal daughters as pawns a reflection of misogyny or of realism. Some scholars say it was merely survival strategy in a patriarchal world, marry or die. Others argue that by conditioning girls to see themselves as sacrifices, courts created their own most dangerous enemies, women who eventually refused to play by rules they never agreed to. You watch your daughter sleep. She doesn't look like you, not yet. She's small and red-faced and angry about light. But there's something in the way her fingers curl when startled that makes you think of your own first nights in this palace, fists clenched against the cold. You know what they'll try to make of her. You've seen the process, the slow shaping, the lessons about pleasing and presenting, about obedience dressed as elegance. They will teach her to hold her tongue, to paint her face, to smile with teeth hidden. But not if you get to her first, so you begin. Not with rebellion, with stories. At night, when no one listens, you tell her about the women who refused to die quietly. Queens who smuggled maps inside their gloves, mistresses who fed poison to kings with a kiss, wives who carved escape tunnels with hairpins. You don't say their names, she wouldn't understand yet, but you speak their truths like lullabies. And when she stirs, you whisper her own name in response, as if reminding her, you are not alone in this line of women. You are not a mistake. The Queen Dowager visits after 2 weeks. She arrives with a pale blanket embroidered in silver and a smile like a closed door. She's lovely, she says, as if that were consolation. You accept the gift. You don't thank her. You'll want to start discussing marriage options soon, she adds, almost casually. Several of the northern houses are looking for connections. You raise an eyebrow. She doesn't yet recognize her own feet. All the better. That's when they're most open to direction. You breathe deeply. Not because you need air, because you need time not to scream. She'll be raised to rule, you say softly. The Dowager pauses. Rule what, exactly? And you smile. Everything they leave behind when they forget to lock the doors. She laughs, but not warmly. Then leaves without another word. You send your daughter's nurse away the next morning. Replace her with a woman you chose. Someone from your own line, far removed but loyal. The nurse doesn't speak much, but you catch her once whispering to the baby, "Don't show them your teeth until you know when to bite." And you know she's the right one. You begin writing again in your journal, this time addressed to your daughter. They wanted you to be currency. I will teach you to be consequence. You write the names of women who endured and overcame. Some survived the throne. Some destroyed it. Some never wore a crown but ruled anyway, from behind curtains and veils and the sharp edge of their minds. You fold the pages into a book bound in blank leather and hide it behind a loose stone near the hearth. If you die before she learns to read, someone will find it. The girl with the scar on her wrist. The one who still sends you coded notes in teacups. You don't know yet what your daughter will become, but you do know this. She will not be quiet. She will not be offered like a meal at a banquet. She will not bow unless she wants to. Because you are no longer just surviving. You are preparing the next girl to win. The first time they try to kill you, it's almost elegant. You're walking through the garden, a rare breeze rustling the dried rose bushes, when your foot catches a root that wasn't there yesterday. Not a large one, just enough to tilt your balance. You fall hard, belly first. Pain lances through you, raw and immediate, like something sharp has woken from sleep inside your body. You scream without meaning to, a sound ripped from your lungs, unshaped by decorum. Your guards run, but not fast enough. Your maid reaches you first, the older one, pale as milk and twice as steady. She cradles your head. You hear shouting, someone calling for a stretcher, but everything swims. Your breath stutters, not just from pain, from knowledge. You knew this was coming. It was never going to be poison. Too obvious, not a dagger, not exile. The easiest way to eliminate a woman like you, too loud, too lasting, is to let nature finish what they start. A fall, a faint, a cough turned wrong. You wake in your chamber hours later. The midwife is sweating, sleeves rolled, blood on her hands. The child is crying, alive. You are not quite. You bleed for 2 days, not from the birth, you did that weeks ago, but from the fall, from the attempt. You don't cry, you barely speak, you just bleed, as if your body is finally releasing all the rage you've been storing in secret places. Here's your historical fact. Royal women who were seen as politically inconvenient often suffered accidents. Maria Carolina of Naples had multiple stillbirths after suspicious falls. In Mughal India, royal women who became too influential were sometimes reported dead of fevers that followed closely after conflicts with male relatives. In England, courtly missteps could lead to fatal illnesses that appeared just as soon as a woman fell out of favor. Your strange detail? In certain Ottoman harems, women suspected of treachery weren't always executed directly. Instead, they were moved to colder, mold-ridden quarters and slowly poisoned by environment. Damp walls, tainted food, deliberate neglect. A death so slow it looked like nature. And the scholarly debate, how often were these deaths truly accidents? Some historians claim many were coincidental. Palaces were rife with disease, and childbirth was always perilous. Others insist these deaths were cleanly orchestrated, wrapped in plausible tragedy to spare reputations, but accomplish the same goal. You survive. That alone enrages them more than anything, because now the court is split. Half whisper that you are cursed, some kind of immortal witch who bleeds but never breaks. The other half say you're faking the injury for sympathy, staging weakness for strategic gain. They don't realize the truth is worse. You're enduring. There's no spell in that, just spite. You return to court after 5 days. You insist on walking, even though the muscles in your thighs burn and your legs tremble like reeds. But you walk. Past the Queen Dowager, past the king, past every noble who dares look at your abdomen and imagine they might still own some part of you. You carry your daughter in your arms, and you do not smile. That evening you sit by the fire and stare into the flames. You haven't spoken since the fall. Your maid brews tea laced with ginger, sage, and bitter bark. You sip it slowly, letting the taste remind you of soil, of roots, of things that grow despite the rot around them. When your voice returns, it isn't soft. You call for the steward. You order a review of the garden maintenance. Every gardener questioned, every change documented. The root that tripped you, it wasn't growing there, you know. The steward offers excuses, shrugs. Perhaps you were simply tired. You lean close. If I find your signature on a single dismissal order tied to my staff, I will bind your tongue with silver and have you read prayers backward until your teeth fall out. He blinks, laughs awkwardly, then realizes you're not joking. The steward resigns within the week. The king visits the next morning. He arrives without announcement, without gifts, just stands in your chamber doorway and stares at your daughter, sleeping in a cradle you carved with your own money from a tree cut in the old woods, far from court. She's stronger than I expected, he says. You say nothing. She has your eyes. Still silence. He shifts, clearly uncomfortable. You should consider a holiday, he says finally. You've earned rest. It's exile in perfume. You say, I'll rest when she is queen. He exhales. There will never be a queen in this land. And you rise, slowly, carefully. You approach him until the space between you crackles with old desire curdled into recognition. There already is, you whisper. That night, you meet with the girl in the chapel again. Not the child, the student. The one who once tied a ribbon under your pillow. She sits beside you in the candlelight, and for the first time, you let her see the scar forming across your hip. They'll try again, you say. I know. You give her a folded letter. If I die, deliver this to the bishop, and this one to the foreign prince. She hesitates. Are you sure? You nod. A daughter may not inherit the throne, but she can inherit leverage. You pass her a sealed vial. She raises an eyebrow. It's not poison, you say. It's proof. Of what, you don't explain, because the truth isn't always what saves you. Sometimes it's the fear of what truth might come next. You walk back to your chambers with purpose. You know now that they will not stop. You will not fade peacefully into another embroidered ghost, weeping in oil on canvas. They will either bury you with your teeth bared, or they will learn to kneel when they speak your name. Either way, you're done falling. The palace loves a good lie. It polishes them like silver. You've heard them all by now, the comforting stories embroidered over wrought. Tales told to guests at banquets, whispered in nursery halls, repeated in court like sacred verses. They are so beautiful, these fictions, so smooth, so symmetrical. A king who fell in love at first sight, a queen who ruled beside him in perfect harmony, children born under moonlight to the sound of singing. You almost believe them sometimes. But then the musicians leave, and the gowns come off, and the blood is scrubbed from the linens before dawn, and all that remains is the truth. The truth never makes it into the portraits, which brings us here, to tonight's necessary fiction, what people think royal bedrooms were like: soft candlelight, velvet everywhere, roses in crystal vases, a queen in pearls, lying languid across the bed, while a king enters with reverence and adoration. Love, duty, dynasty, braided seamlessly into one noble act. But you know better. So here's your historical fact. Royal sex was rarely romantic and almost never private. Kings and queens were expected to perform the act of consummation in rooms that were, if not filled with witnesses, then certainly within earshot of them. Especially with new marriages, bedchambers became political theaters. Sheets were checked. Witnesses sometimes stood behind curtains. In certain French courts, nobles were even required to escort the couple to bed and remain until the curtains were drawn. And the fringe detail? In 17th century Denmark, a noblewoman wrote in her journal that during her wedding night, she had to lie naked on satin sheets while court attendants watched from behind an embroidered screen to confirm her maidenhood was gifted. They applauded afterward. Applauded. The debate? Was the royal bedroom ever about pleasure, or was it strictly politics? Scholars disagree. Some argue that intimacy and desire had their place, especially with mistresses where love could breathe. Others insist royal sex was always strategic. Each union, a negotiation, each night a silent referendum on power and lineage. You still remember your first night, not because it was passionate or tender or even painful. You remember it because of what it wasn't. There was no music, no roses, just the smell of wine and starch and something metallic in the air. The king didn't ask if you were ready. He didn't speak much at all, just looked at you like something sealed in glass, precious, unspoiled, and already his. You'd been told to expect discomfort, but no one prepared you for the silence afterward. That was the worst part, the stillness, as if nothing had happened, as if your entire world hadn't just tipped sideways and spilled into a version of yourself you didn't recognize. You cried into the pillow later, quietly, not from pain, from disorientation, like waking up in someone else's story and realizing you're the tragic subplot. The next morning, a maid quietly took the sheets, checked them. You caught the flicker of relief in her eyes when she saw the stain. It meant you had value. Then she smiled at you like something sacred had occurred. You felt like a wound they were already trying to decorate. After that, the king visited less. Your usefulness had been confirmed, the mystery gone. You became a chamber to be entered, not explored. It was never violent, just methodical, purposeful, like feeding a fire with logs instead of kindling. There was no pleasure, only obligation, his, yours. And then there were the nights when he didn't come at all. When another woman left his chamber in the early hours, hair tangled and gown misbuttoned. You never asked her name. What would be the point? You weren't a wife. You were a room with legs. But you learned, didn't you? You learned to reclaim the space. You began placing books on the nightstand. You lit your own candles, chose your own oils. You repurposed the ritual. If you were to be entered like a chamber, you decided what it would contain. Sometimes you whispered names of your foremothers into the darkness. Sometimes you memorized poems. Sometimes you simply looked up and imagined what the ceiling would say if it could speak. Then you started writing descriptions, notes, anatomy of the performance, not erotic, clinical, powerful. You wrote about how a man touches you when he wants something, how he pretends you don't see his flinch when you don't flinch, how the kingdom pretends the bedroom is a holy place, when really it's a contract, signed in breath and silence and sometimes blood. You hid those writings, not because they were shameful, but because they were true. And truth has always been more dangerous than desire. Now years later, they act like you're a mystery. The king avoids your eyes. The queen dowager no longer comments on your body. Even the mistresses watch you warily, as if you know something they've yet to learn. And you do. You know that the bedroom was never the real battlefield. It was the pretext, the justification. Everything else, your rank, your voice, your influence, was made possible or impossible by what happened behind those locked doors. Whether you were favored, whether you conceived, whether you performed. You made peace with it a long time ago, and then you lit it on fire. Now when you lie in your own bed, it's yours. No king enters without permission. No man leaves without answer. You still feel the weight of those early nights, the ones when you didn't know you were allowed to say no. But you've turned them into something else, into armor, into ink. You wrote your own name in the dark, and this time no one applauded. But no one erased it either. The royal wedding is announced in late autumn, when the leaves have browned and the wind carries the scent of wood smoke and old secrets. Not yours, of course. No one would dare wed you now. Not formally, not publicly. You're too sharp, too storied, too close to power, and yet never quite inside it. You are the hallway that leads to the throne room, but never the throne itself. No, the bride this time is a girl with the right blood and the wrong age. 18, maybe. Or 16 with the posture of someone told to look older. Her portrait is unveiled at dinner. Painted skin, flawless. Her lips are pursed in a way that suggests demure obedience. She stares off to the left, because direct gazes are for women who make men nervous. The king is marrying again. Your daughter isn't mentioned in the announcement. The courtiers bow as if nothing has happened. The queen dowager hosts a supper that evening, bright with new lace and wine and the kind of laughter that sounds rehearsed. But beneath the clinking glasses and hollow compliments, there's something tighter running beneath it all. A thread of nervous anticipation. Everyone is wondering the same thing. What will she do? And by she, they mean you. You, who has outlasted 3 mistresses, 2 crises, and 1 near murder. You, who delivered a living child and didn't disappear. You, who walks through the garden like you planted it, and speaks only when silence has said too much. You've become part myth, part cautionary tale. You attend the supper in a gown the color of dried blood. Here's your historical fact. Even in the modern royal age, women at court still live under quiet rules of obedience and performance. Marriages remain strategic. In the 20th century, British royal brides were still subject to virginity rumors, paternity doubts, and intense tabloid surveillance, cloaked in tradition and the illusion of choice. The protocols may be updated, but the politics remain ancient. And your quirky fringe detail? In Thailand's royal court, a now defunct tradition required consorts to undergo weeks of palace training, learning how to kneel correctly, sleep in silence, and present themselves with precise posture. Skills passed down like sacred rites, all designed to keep the woman invisible unless summoned. Now for the debate. Are modern royal marriages progress or performance? Some argue that today's queens and princesses are freer than ever, educated, independent, globally visible. But others argue that the stage has simply changed, that the costumes are sleeker, the lights brighter, but the script is still the same. Smile, conceive, behave, disappear. You sip your wine and watch the new bride from a distance. She doesn't look terrified, not quite, but her hands tremble when she lifts the goblet, and she flinches when the king touches her elbow. Her eyes dart to yours only once, like a startled deer catching a shadow it can't name. You smile. It's not kindness, it's warning. Later in the corridor, you catch her alone, not by accident. You step into her path like a shadow slipping out from the wall. You'll want to pad your shoes, you say gently. She blinks. What? For the procession. The marble's slick. Someone once fell. She doesn't speak, just stares. So young, so fragile under the powdered veneer. You can see her heart beating in her throat. You step closer. You're not the first, you murmur. And if you're lucky, you won't be the last. That's the real game. Last as long as you can. Learn everything they don't teach you. And when they stop watching, write it all down. She opens her mouth, maybe to thank you. But you're already walking away. Because pity is a waste of energy. And you're no longer in the business of consolation. That night, you burn the final copy of the letter you once wrote to the king, back when you were still trying to explain yourself. The one where you apologized for being too clever, too outspoken, too visible. You watch the flames eat your own guilt, and you feel cleaner than you have in years. The next morning, your daughter says her first full sentence. She watches everything. You look up from your writing desk, startled. Who? Your daughter just shrugs and returns to stacking pebbles on the windowsill. You smile, because she's right. And she will inherit that skill like a crown forged in fire. The wedding comes quickly. Gold banners, church bells, perfume thick in the halls. You do not attend, not because you weren't invited. You were, in fact, given a front row seat as a gesture of respect. But you declined. Instead, you spend the morning with your daughter, showing her how to draw birds on the walls of your private chamber with chalk. One of them looks like it's flying off the page. She laughs. You mark the date. At noon, you receive a letter. It's unsigned, sealed with green wax. Inside is a list of names, mostly servants, 2 minor nobles, and 1 foreign dignitary. You recognize it immediately, your network, the people you've slowly collected, the ones who owe you, fear you, or believe in what you're building. The message is clear. We're still with you. You write 1 sentence in return and hand it off to the messenger. The wind has shifted, and it has. The new queen may be fresh, obedient, and flush with lineage, but she isn't you. She doesn't yet know how to read the language of glances, the choreography of survival, and she will learn, eventually, that being queen is the loneliest power of all. You don't envy her, but you don't pity her either, because she will either become what they want or what they fear. And you'll be watching. When night falls, your daughter asks if she can sleep in your bed. She curls beside you, one tiny hand on your collarbone. Tell me a story, she whispers. You stroke her hair and begin. Once upon a time, there was a girl who lived in a palace full of traps. You do not tell her how it ends, because you haven't written the ending yet. And maybe, if you're careful, she will. The ink fades faster than the memory. You notice it one morning, when flipping through your journals. Pages you'd filled in careful, even strokes, years of records, thoughts, whispers captured in lines, are beginning to pale. Not vanish exactly, but soften, bleed into the parchment. A few smudges here and there, lines that blur at the edges. Your handwriting, losing its certainty. You run a finger along one page, then pull it away. Gray dust comes with it. A metaphor? Maybe. But metaphors don't bleed. You sit in silence for a long time, holding the journal in your lap like it's a dying friend. They always warned you, didn't they? That stories fade when not repeated, that memories warp, that history bends not toward truth, but toward power. And power doesn't like women who remember. You think of all the things you've written, things no one else dared put to page, names, dates, who touched whom, who killed whom, who used whom, and more than that, how it felt to live through it. To sit quietly while men with powdered wigs decided how much of your life was acceptable. To smile through pain that would have broken stronger bodies. To give birth to a daughter knowing she would inherit the cage you once thought was a throne. You wrote everything down because you thought that would make it real. and now the pages are going gray? Here's your historical fact. The stories of royal women were often recorded by others, men, mostly, who shaped their legacies to suit the politics of the time. Powerful queens became sinners or saints, depending on who held the quill. 𝓑𝓸𝓻𝓲𝓷𝓰 was either a devoted mother or a bloodthirsty poisoner. Empress Dowager 𝓑𝓬𝓼 was either a despot or a reformer. Rarely both. Rarely accurate. Your fringe fact? In Imperial Russia, noble women were sometimes deliberately erased from family portraits if they fell from favor. Painted over, literally turned into potted plants or curtains. In one case, a duke's first wife was replaced with a swan. The painting hangs in a gallery to this day. No one blinks. Now the debate. Who gets to tell a royal woman's story, especially when she doesn't live long enough to tell it herself? Some scholars argue for preservation through folklore, through letters, through whispered tradition. Others say truth requires structure, citation, proof. But what happens when the only proof lies in a woman's private journal, and that journal is fading before anyone thought to copy it? You begin making duplicates, not exact ones. That would be dangerous. But echoes, rewritten entries in altered ink, scattered among books and documents. You slip some into the chapel's hymnals, others into the guest ledgers. One, you tuck beneath your daughter's mattress, wrapped in silk with a single note. Not yet. You know they've tried to erase you before. They'll try again. But this time, they won't find a neat, singular story to bury. They'll find versions, unstable, multiplying, resistant to consensus, and your daughter will grow up in the maze of it. You watch her now, curled in the garden, whispering to the ivy as if it whispers back. She's learned not to speak too freely around the wrong people, but she remembers everything. You tested it, told her a false tale about the Queen Dowager, then asked about it days later. She corrected you gently. That's not what happened. You said she was crying, but she doesn't cry. She watches. You smile every time you remember it. She's learning. You're nearly done with your final book when the Queen Dowager summons you. Not to scold, not to threaten, to reminisce. You sit across from her in a sun-drenched salon that still smells like lemon oil and disuse. She's older now, thinner, still elegant, but less like a blade and more like the sheath left behind. Her eyes don't pierce like they used to. Do you remember, she says, when we first met? You nod. You were all silk and pride, thought you could remake the world with a well-placed glare. You smile, slow and practiced. I still might. She laughs and coughs. When she recovers, she asks, "What are you leaving behind?" You blink. Pardon? Everyone leaves something. A son, a war, a church. What's yours? You say nothing, because you're not ready to answer that. Not out loud. She studies you. It's harder than it looks, isn't it? Not being forgotten. You meet her gaze, and for the first time in years, she looks almost human. She doesn't apologize. Of course not. But when you leave, she presses something into your hand. A ring. Small, gold, worn smooth at the edges. It belonged to someone, she says. I've forgotten who. That night, you place it in your daughter's palm as she sleeps. A symbol, meaningless to history. But not to her. You finish your final journal entry the next morning, not with a confession. With a question. What happens to a story they can't kill but can't control? You leave the page unsealed. Because you already know the answer. Not in words, but in your daughter's footsteps. Echoing, sure and soft as she walks down the corridor. No one ever thought to watch. They're planning the celebration before the ink dries on the proclamation. A royal jubilee, one of those glitter-drenched spectacles meant to blind the people just long enough to forget how many hands are still bleeding behind the curtains. Flags go up, bells ring. Courtiers parade through the halls in silks dyed so deep they shimmer like beetle wings. The official reason? 10 years since the king's triumphant peace treaty with the northern border. The real reason? Power is slipping, and nothing hides fear like fireworks. You watch from your window. Not because you care about the party, but because you care about the stage, because every performance in this palace is also a message. And this one has your name written all over it, though not where anyone can see. You read it in the guest list. The invitations sent to nobles you know despise you. You read it in the Queen's carefully tailored dress, in the music selected for the opening waltz. It's not a celebration, it's a reset, a reminder of the proper order, of who holds the crown and who does not, a polished warning delivered with wine and rose petals. But you've been here long enough to understand what they've forgotten, that reminders work both ways. So you prepare, no weapon, no protest, just presence. You choose your gown carefully, black, like the myth they've turned you into. No embroidery, no jewels, just fabric cut to move like smoke and catch every reflection. When you enter the ballroom, the music doesn't falter, but the air does. A dozen conversations drop off mid-sentence. You walk slowly, deliberately, each step loud without a sound. And at your side, your daughter. Dressed in violet, not a child's color, not quite a woman's. Something in between. A warning in its own right. She walks tall, chin lifted, the way you taught her. She doesn't fidget or flinch. And when the Queen catches her eye, she holds the gaze just a beat too long. Good. Here's your historical fact. Jubilees, coronations, and royal celebrations often serve to bury dissent. Elizabeth I's famous 1601 progress was timed to distract from growing political unrest. Napoleon's coronation was engineered to remind the world who had seized the reins. These events were never just about joy. They were about power, consolidated, displayed, claimed. Your fringe fact? In 19th century Persia, during the Qajar dynasty, some royal women were given roles in state processions, but were required to wear veils that concealed not just their faces, but their names. A powerful woman was acceptable, a known woman was dangerous. And the debate: are these spectacles effective tools of stability or fragile illusions? Some scholars argue they pacify rebellion by offering people beauty, awe, and distraction. Others say they accelerate collapse, because every glittering mask eventually slips, and what lies beneath is rarely worth the gold. You stay through the first act of the Jubilee, the dancing, the toasts. The king stands on his dais, hand lightly resting on the Queen's shoulder, face set in that ageless mask of practiced confidence. He doesn't look at you directly, but once during a particularly loud cheer, his eyes flick toward yours, brief, calculating. You tilt your head, barely. He looks away. Later, in the gardens, your daughter drifts among the nobles like a shadow with eyes. She listens, she watches, she learns. You don't follow her, you let her move freely. She is not a leash to be pulled or a secret to be hidden. She's a storm forming behind silk. One of the guests, a minister's wife, approaches you near the fountain. She says, "Your daughter is unusual." You sip your wine. She's aware. The woman hesitates. That can be dangerous. You smile, slow and small, only if you try to lie to her. By midnight, the celebration begins to crack. A fight breaks out between two generals, drunk, loud, sloppily veiled in politics. The musicians miss a cue. The wine runs out too early. A chandelier flickers, then sputters. It's all minor. But the palace notices. It always notices. Because perfection is an illusion, and illusions can't sweat. You leave quietly, daughter at your side. The streets outside the palace are quieter than they should be. Torches burn low. Guards stand farther apart. You catch glimpses of the city below, the rooftops dotted with lanterns, people watching, listening, waiting. The kingdom is shifting. You feel it in the bones of the palace, in the way the doors creak now when they didn't before, in how the tapestries flutter like they're trying to whisper warnings, in how every echo seems to say the same thing: it's not over. You return to your chamber, remove your gown, unpin your hair. Your daughter sits cross-legged on the bed, flipping through one of the old books you once wrote, before the pages began to fade. She asks, "Will there be another queen after her?" You answer without thinking, "There always is." She considers that. Then, "What if I don't want to be queen?" You turn to her slowly, then don't. "But what if someone tries to make me?" You sit beside her, fold her hand into yours. Then you remember this. They can crown you, but they can't make you bow. She nods. Once, and keeps reading. You lie beside her that night, staring up at the ceiling. The same ceiling you once memorized, back when you thought knowing the pattern would give you control. It didn't. But it gave you something else. Patience. The power they hold isn't real unless you believe in it. The silence they demand only exists if you let it. And the stories they write, you've already replaced them. You close your eyes. Your daughter breathes slow and steady beside you. You don't know what the future holds, whether she'll choose the crown or burn it, but you do know one thing. The next time someone asks what girls endured for power, there will be more than whispers in reply. There will be pages, signed, sealed, unignorable. The candles are nearly out. Their wicks tremble, little flames gasping against the dark, as if even the fire is too tired to keep watch. The palace sleeps now, not the real sleep of peace, but the brittle kind, like a blade resting between strikes. The courtiers have gone home. The goblets are empty. The costumes hung back in the wardrobe. All that remains is the quiet. The kind of quiet that hums with memory. You lie there, eyes open, listening to your daughter's breathing. Soft, steady. Each inhale a promise that someone made it through, that someone heard your story and lived anyway, that someone will walk forward not as a girl offered up like a ribbon on a treaty, but as a force with her own direction. You think back through the years, the bedchambers and birthings, the poison and the pearls, the silences forced down your throat like medicine, the bruises hidden under silk, the names they called you when they didn't think you were listening. Witch, widow, whore, queen. You endured them all. You rewrote them all. And now, the girl beside you doesn't have to start where you did. She begins with your ending. That's what survival looks like. Not glory, not fame, not gold, but continuation. A door that wasn't locked, a record that wasn't erased, a future that isn't shaped by silence. So when they ask years from now who she is, when they try to shape her story for their own comfort, she will smile that small, sharp smile she learned from you and say, "I know exactly where I come from." Then she'll turn the page and start her own.